enjoy the holding music.
Your call is very important to us.
Ready to go? It's 6 p.m., so I'd like to call this meeting of the Cathedral City Planning Commission to order for the June 4th, 2025 meeting. Madam Secretary, can I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner McPhail?
Here.
Commissioner Mead?
Here.
Commissioner Bedard?
Here.
Vice Chair Lee?
Present.
Chair Malakoff?
Present.
Let the record show all commissioners are present.
And I'd like us all to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance to our great country.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Okay, so then if there are no changes, we can move into public comments. The public is invited to address the Planning Commission on any matter not on the agenda. If you wish to speak on an agenda item, please wait to be recognized under that item. Except for special circumstances, the Brown Act prohibits the Planning Commission or staff from responding or taking action on any comments made by the public unless it pertains to an item that appears on the agenda. All speakers should give their name and city of residence, and please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. So I don't see that we have anybody in the audience. Well, maybe we do. Do we have anybody that wants to speak?
Chair, we did receive the following comment for the record, provided to the members of the commission and made available for public inspection at the entrance and chambers. David Kozlow provided comments related to the November 2026 City Council elections.
Okay, and do we have anybody that wants to speak through Zoom or?
No, do we have anyone in the audience wishing to speak for a public comment? We have no one wishing to speak.
Then we can move on to approval of minutes. Approval of the May 21st, 2025 meeting minutes. Do we have any changes to the minutes? And if not, do we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
I move to approve.
And do we have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Bedard, did you vote?
Sorry.
Okay, let the record show a motion was made by Vice Chair Lee, seconded by Commissioner Mead. Motion passes.
And that leads us to our public hearing items. A zoning ordinance amendment 25-002 and specific plan amendment 25-002. Adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council adopt ordinances amending Chapter 9.18 of the Cathedral City Municipal Code to add single-family dwellings as a permitted use in the RM, Multiple Family Residential District, under certain provisions, and amending specific plan 87-26C to allow single-family dwellings when permitted in the underlying zone, and to clarify that single-family dwellings are subject to the development standards of the underlying zoning district. Ms. Camps, do we have a report?
Yes, we do. Good evening, Chair Malakoff, Vice Chair Lee, and members of the Planning Commission. I'm Dawn Camps, Associate Planner, and today I'll be presenting Zoning Ordinance Amendment 25002 and Specific Plan Amendment 25002 for your consideration. These amendments propose to add single-family dwellings as a permitted use in the RM district for lots no greater than 10,000 square feet and that do not have frontage on an arterial highway, and to amend Specific Plan 8726C to allow single-family dwellings in the specific plan when permitted in the underlying zoning district. So to begin with, some background. In February of this year, a property owner submitted a building permit application for the construction of a new single-family dwelling on an approximately 9,500 square foot property located at 68955 Elantra Road. According to the general plan, this property is designated for medium-density residential at a density of 4.5 to 10 dwelling units per acre. And according to the zoning map, the property is in the RM, or multifamily residential district. While there are existing single-family dwellings adjacent to the property and on nearby properties, new single-family dwellings are not permitted in the RM zoning district. The property is also located within specific plan 8726C, which also prohibits new single-family dwellings. After investigating this property on Olancha, staff found that this property is one of multiple vacant properties within the RM district that are too small to fully support development as multifamily projects while meeting the density requirements established by the RM district. And that finding is what led to the amendments being proposed today. So this map shows all properties in the RM district outlined in yellow. There are 139 lots zoned RM, of which 28 are currently undeveloped. The undeveloped lots are clustered in two areas, so there are 4 large lots just south of the I-10, and the remaining 24 undeveloped lots are located in a corridor along Date Palm Drive, south of Ramon Road, and north of Dinah Shore. Permitted uses in the RM district include multifamily dwellings and compatible uses such as small family daycares, supportive and transitional housing, and group homes. But currently, single-family dwellings are not permitted in the RM district. The RM zoning district has a permitted density of 4.5 to 10 dwelling units per acre. As noted in the staff report, the zoning code actually lists 2 permitted density ranges for the RM district, a medium density range at 4.5 to 10 dwelling units per acre and a medium-high density range of 11 to 20 dwelling units per acre. But all sites in the RM district currently have an underlying general plan designation of medium density residential, 4.5 to 10 dwelling units per acre, so that is effectively the density for the zoning district right now as well. The RM zoning district also has a minimum lot size of 20,000 square feet for all newly created lots. However, there are currently 60 existing non-conforming properties in the RM district that are smaller than 20,000 square feet, including 28 properties that are 10,000 square feet or smaller. In researching the Elantra property, staff found that it is difficult to develop residential uses on these sites that are less than 10,000 square feet while meeting the RM development standards. So specifically, based on the permitted density of 4.5 to 10 dwelling units per acre, a 10,000 square foot property in the RM district could be developed with a minimum of 1 dwelling unit and a maximum of 2 dwelling units. But because the RM district does not permit single-family dwellings, to meet the definition of multifamily, there must be 3 or more units. So the residential development of these properties, 10,000 square feet or less, could not essentially be developed while meeting the current development standards. The proposed zoning ordinance amendment is intended to facilitate infill development on these smaller vacant lots. The amendment would add single-family dwellings as a permitted use in the RM district, specifically on lots that are no greater than 10,000 square feet and that do not have frontage on an arterial highway. Other than adding single-family dwellings as a permitted use on select properties, the proposed amendment would not modify any of the development standards in the RM district, including lot dimensions, yard requirements, coverage, building height, parking, fencing, and open space. There are a total of 23 properties in the RM district that are less than 10,000 square feet or less, and that do not have frontage on an arterial highway. Of these 23 properties, 7 of them are currently vacant and therefore would be impacted by the proposed amendment, and these properties are highlighted in blue on this map. One of those properties is the Elantra property that I mentioned in the introduction. So this proposed zoning ordinance amendment is intentionally narrow in scope in order to facilitate infill development where it might otherwise be constrained by the existing development standards, while maintaining consistency with the intent and purpose of the RM zoning district, as well as the development pattern that's established by the general plan land use map. So specifically, the distribution of land use intensities that's established on the general plan land use map generally concentrates higher intensity land uses along major transportation corridors. So for that reason, the amendments being proposed to the RM district would be limited to properties that do not have frontage on an arterial highway, which in this case is Date Palm Drive. To address a bit of background on why the 10,000 square foot cutoff is being proposed for this amendment, staff is intentionally, again, keeping the proposed amendment narrow in scope. So as previously stated, 20,000 square feet is the minimum lot size for all newly created lots in the RM district. 13,000 square feet would be the minimum lot size at which 3 dwelling units can be developed within that 4.5 to 10 dwelling units per acre density range. In terms of 10,000 square feet, the Olancha property, which was the sort of catalyst for this proposed amendment, is 0.22 acres or about 9,500 square feet, and the other 6 vacant properties in the RM district are also that same size. While there are 4 properties in the RM district that are currently between 10,000 and 13,000 square feet, these properties are all already developed. The intention here, again, is to facilitate development of smaller infill lots in the RM district that may otherwise be constrained by the current development standards, while limiting the scope of the proposed amendments for consistency with the medium density development pattern. So the properties being impacted by the proposed zoning ordinance amendment are all also within the planning area for specific plan 8726C. This specific plan was originally adopted in 1989, but it has been amended as recently as 2019. It covers an approximately 37-acre area outlined here in red, and underlying the specific plan is a mix of RM and planned community commercial zoning. The specific plan contains a list of prohibited uses, which currently includes single-family dwellings. So staff is proposing to amend the specific plan to allow single-family dwellings when permitted in the underlying zoning district. So this means that single-family dwellings would be allowed in the specific plan for sites that are zoned RM and that are no greater than 10,000 square feet and do not have frontage on an arterial highway. Because the residential development standards in the specific plan are intended for multifamily development, the proposed amendment would also clarify that single-family development would be subject to the development standards of the underlying zoning district. So now that I've laid out the proposed amendments and their rationale, there are 2 additional points I'd like to touch on. First is that the sites subject to the proposed zoning ordinance amendment are not included in the housing element land inventory. In fact, the vacant infill lots listed in the housing element land inventory are specifically in the R1 and R2 districts. So the proposed amendment would not impact the city's housing element or RENA. Second, it was discovered at a late hour that single-family dwellings were in fact a permitted use in the RM district until September of 2022, when a zoning ordinance amendment was adopted to support implementation of the housing element. That amendment struck single-family dwellings as a permitted use from the RM district. So it's not necessarily clear why single-family dwellings were struck from the RM district at this time, but it is likely that the issue facing the Olancha property and these other 6 smaller vacant properties is an unintended consequence of that zoning ordinance amendment from 2022. In terms of environmental review, the project is exempt from CEQA pursuant to the common sense exemption. The proposed zoning ordinance amendment and specific plan amendment are text amendments only, so they're not proposing any new development. But it's also worth noting that future development of any single-family dwellings that might be facilitated by these amendments would be ministerial projects that are exempt from CEQA. The specific plan amendment required consultation with local and regional tribes pursuant to SB 18. The project was transmitted to these tribes on April 2nd to initiate the 90-day consultation period. So far, 4 responses have been received. Only the Agua Caliente Band of Cahuilla Indians have requested formal consultation. That consultation was conducted and the tribe formally closed the consultation in writing on May 20th of 2025. None of the other 3 tribes that responded requested formal consultation, and the 90-day period will close on July 2nd. The project was noticed in accordance with the new government code that requires a 20-day notice for zoning ordinance amendments that impact the uses permitted on real property. In response to the public hearing notices, 3 responses were received from the public over the phone. These responses, in each case, the residents were looking for a clarification about what the proposed amendments were and how it would impact their properties. And in discussing their properties with the property owners, it was found that none of their properties would be impacted at all by the amendments. So that concludes my presentation. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution recommending that the City Council adopt an ordinance approving zoning ordinance amendment 25-002-0002 to amend Chapter 9.18 of Title IX of the Cathedral City Municipal Code, and approving specific plan amendment 25-0002, amending specific plan 8726C. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Ms. Camps? Let's start with Commissioner Bedard.
Sure. I think this is great. I think it's a very positive way that we're demonstrating we're working with the community and what's actually there. I'm curious if there are properties that are on Date Palm, the Arterial Highway, or is that the right phrasing? Arterial Highway, that are falling into a category similar to this. And what's our response for that?
Yes, let me pull up my notes here.
I know there is existing single-family homes, I believe, within these streets. I know Acker Chiropractic, which is now a business but does have a resident on it. Next door, there's an artist that has several pieces out in the yard there. And that's still a single-family residence as far as I know. Curious how those smaller lots will fall into this kind of plan.
So within the RM district, there are 5 properties that are 10,000 square feet or less that have frontage onto Date Palm. 2 of them are already developed, or one of them is in the midst of being developed as part of the Newport 17 project. The other 3 are currently vacant, but are surrounded by other vacant properties, so there is the potential for lot consolidation in that case. And again, sort of the intention with the amendments was to limit new single-family dwellings going along that major transportation corridor. I know there are some existing, but...
And the basis for that recommendation, too, this actually comes from the general plan, too. We look at the circulation element. There are intersection spacing and driveway access restrictions on arterial highways that could not be met if that developed as single family. So our encouragement there really is for those lots to be consolidated and redeveloped as part of a larger project.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lee?
Yeah. The complicated little problem here. And so I'm trying to get my head around some of it. According to the packet, the base zone for this is PCC.
So within the specific plan, the base zone is a mix of RM, let me pull up my map here, a mix of RM and PCC. So the portions that are PCC would not be impacted by the proposed amendment.
So it's probably just the wording in the specific plan which said the base zone was PCC, which was why I was going to ask. So we also have RM on top of that, and we have REB on top of that. It's like multiple layers. So one of the things I was going to ask about there was which takes precedence. If I look at 918, which is the RM information, are we saying all of that applies in this specific zone if we add single-family homes? And let me say why I want to know that. It's because it seems to me some of the things in 918 are not consistent with single-family properties. So if I look at 918.090, parking allows for carports, which we don't normally allow for a single-family home. So I'm wondering how we balance the two, the specific plan and 918 RM.
So in terms of the specific plan, I think for the development of single-family homes, it would really essentially default back to the standards in the RM district because the language in the proposed amendment to the specific plan says that. In terms of the development standards in Chapter 918, the RM district, it's a fair point about the carport. I would need to look at that. The other ones, so again, the district is generally intended for multifamily uses,
right,
but the standards would work regardless. And because it's kind of a very few lots that would be impacted, for example, it has a clause about private open space. They need to have 80 square feet per unit, but a single family development would be able to just accommodate that by having open space on the lot, and based on the lot coverage requirements that would occur anyways. The carport, I guess that would potentially need further discussion. I don't know if currently we would then be allowing carports for new single family dwellings in the RM district, because that's how it's written.
Right. And I don't necessarily disagree with allowing carport. It just occurred, just occurred to me that there might be some inconsistency, so I'm just checking.
So if I can opine on that for a moment.
Yeah.
You're right, there may be some inconsistencies, and I think we all recognize that this is a little bit of an unusual item. This is not how we ordinarily would look at amending the code, but I think we've recognized a critical problem where we have removed any potential use of a handful of properties within the city, including one where there is an active permit. We're looking for a quick solution. We're looking for a fix. And this is an instance where I would say we can look to the development code update for a more comprehensive, a more global solution, recognizing that as we develop that solution, we need to understand that there are non-conforming lots, that there are lots like those that Ms. Camps has presented in her presentation that we need to consider too as we make these amendments to the zoning code, so that we're not removing all potential use of that property. So I think Ms. Camps has framed it correctly that should this be approved, that a single family use on a lot less than 10,000 square feet that is not on an arterial highway would be permitted based on the development standards in the RM zone district as it stands today.
And we're not proposing here to change any lot sizes that already exist. Yeah.
No.
Okay, because again, I'm looking back at the specific plan for Rio Vista Village, and there we did away with all the 10,000 square foot lots and said that they weren't marketable. So, all right. None of this precludes then, if you've got a 10,000 square foot lot, the provisions of SB9 or other. So these lots could be split. We could have 4 units on a lot, I think. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so they could still be multiple dwellings, actually, even on these 10,000 square foot lots.
It's possible you could see an urban lot split. It's possible that you could see a two-family dwelling unit. It's possible you could see an ADU and a JADU.
Okay, all right. Good. I couldn't quite get the arithmetic to work, but I don't really care. But to get to 4.5 per acre, it would be 9,680 square feet. So you end up at 4.35 with 10,000. But you pointed out that that would be 0.99 of a house, so I think we're good. All right. Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
I was going to go last, but my question is very much related to where you left off.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to go next. I understood the technicalities that, you're trying to solve, and I understand that it's better to give somebody a chance to build something than just to say, you're out of luck and you can't do anything. So I get all that, but I'm having a lot of trouble with the general plan, and I still don't really understand how you're complying with the general plan. So if you took 10,000 square feet, because that's the minimum size that you could build a single-family lot in the RM district, and the house was 2,000 square feet, then that would be 5 units. Then that would be 5 units to the acre. So then that would work
On a 10,000 or 20,000 square foot?
on a 10,000.
I don't have the math for a 2,000 square foot house specifically, but
So a 2,000 square foot home on a 10,000 square foot lot, that would be 20% lot coverage. That's not necessarily the density calculation.
Okay, maybe I'm asking the question wrong. How, on a 10,000 and a 20,000 square foot lot, which are round numbers, does compliance with the general plan is based on the size of the house?
no, the general plan states the permitted density range of 4.5 to 10 dwelling units per acre, which, as shown on this slide, 4.5 dwelling units per acre on a 10,000 foot property would be 0.99 dwelling units. 10 dwelling units per acre on a 10,000 square foot property would be 2 units. So one dwelling unit would, I guess, fall just above 4.5 dwelling units per acre, but because that's the minimum, that would be
So-
a permitted.
What may be missing here is that the definition of multifamily is 3 or more attached units, whereas single family is a single unit or a duplex unit. So the density could work, but for the definition of multifamily, which requires 3 or more attached units.
So, you have a 10,000 square foot lot, and your density is 4.5 units to the acre. Building one house, I still don't understand how you can get to 4.5 dwelling units per acre.
Because, unless I'm misreading this, 10,000 square feet is only 0.23 of an acre. So if you multiply that by 4 to get to a full acre, if you round it up, you say each one is a quarter acre, every 10,000 square foot lot, you're getting 4 of these lots per acre. So if you have one house on each one, that's 4 houses per acre. It has nothing to do with the size of the house, it just has to do with the size of the lot.
Right.
Right? That's correct?
So what you're saying is, you take 10,000 square feet for the lot and divide that by 0.23.
So the way I
No.
calculated it is I converted 10,000 square feet to acreage, which is 0.23, and if you multiply that by 4.5, then you get that 0.99 units. Likewise, if you multiply it by 10, you would get the 2 units.
Maybe if I say that an acre is 43,560 square feet.
Yes.
And if you divide that by 4.5, then you would need 9,680 square feet in order to build one house. Yeah,
And you would multiply that by 3 to get the minimum lot size for a 3-unit.
right.
Can we come back to you and move
I
forward? and
I
then-
guess I'll try to figure it out. I'm having a brain block on this. Commissioner Mead?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, since we have a shortage of housing, we know we're getting a presentation later about how we are not even remotely close to being on track to meet our RENA numbers. And we're already proposing making 2 amendments, one to the zoning code and one to the specific plan. Why are we not tweaking the code or making an exception in the other direction to allow for slightly more density so we could get more housing? Rather than, I mean, it seems to me that the vast majority of projects that are under development, under construction, have already been approved, are large single-family properties, and what we need is more multifamily. So did you consider at all saying on lots, let's say, that couldn't meet the requirements just in this very specific plan, that maybe the density could go up to 10 or 15 instead of 10, so that you could have a triplex, essentially, something like that, which could go on the property, would still be multifamily? Just curious.
I would concede that, again, part of the impetus for this amendment was a specific property owner who's actually in attendance today, and that was sort of why we were trying to keep the scope limited, understanding that generally speaking, we are trying to facilitate more housing development. But for kind of this particular scenario, it made more sense to allow a single-family dwelling, which is what was being proposed for that lot, and many of these lots have been sitting vacant.
I guess my only concern is knowing that we are going through the whole development code update. By passing these amendments now we're basically, potentially for less than a year, going to lock in something that maybe if we went through the development code update, we would decide, hey, we would prefer to just tighten up the density and allow multifamily on those lots, and now we're going to have this weird middle period where people could submit plans and then we undo it and then we just have more non-conforming. I'm just thinking, like, my personal preference, and I don't even know if this is even allowed, but would be to allow this one lot to do this and to not mess with anything else and not change the zoning and not have an amendment in general, because it seems like I get why we want to approve this one thing because someone's ready to go, but to change all of them because of one project, when we ultimately may not want that, seems, I'm having a hard time with that, I guess.
I appreciate the concern, and that was something that staff discussed, at least in the sense of, how can we permit this one project, this one permit, without having unintended consequences ourselves? How can we do this in a limited way? And I'll ask Ms. Camps to clarify just how many properties this affects, but this amendment before you this evening was crafted in a manner to open the door, but open the door as narrowly as possible. And that's why you have the 10,000 square foot maximum lot size for the single family, and why it's not permitted on the arterial highways. It was limiting that potential application. I agree with you that there are broader questions, and I would say that the development code update is an appropriate lens for us to look at how we're intensifying residential zoning within the city. The zoning code is consistent with the general plan land use map, that there's not an incongruity there, but it is interesting to see that there's 2 density ranges within the RM zoning district, yet on the general plan land use map, we only support the medium density residential. I think that's too large of a question for us to consider in this timeline where we're trying to support a property owner and getting their permit out the door. But I do think that is a good question to ask and answer through the development code update to ensure that we're calibrating densities appropriately to permit the residential products, not only on these properties, but other properties in the RM and other residential zone districts.
I would just add that there are only 7 vacant properties that meet all the conditions to be
Yeah.
applicable for this amendment. So
Yeah,
it's-
I know it's only 7, but I mean, that's the difference between 7 single-family homes and 21 multifamily units, which I think is enough of a difference that it gives me pause about supporting this.
My other counter to that is the prevalence of larger RM zone properties throughout the city that have not developed. We do have many RM zone properties, many residential properties that are undeveloped that have not come forward. So 7, it is more than none, but I think the risk to the city or the loss in potential dwelling units is relatively small.
Okay. Still not sold, but
Commissioner McPhail?
I align myself with Commissioner Mead's remark. That's what happens when you go last. You expressed a concern I had. I also want to thank you for the report. You knocked off 4 of my questions. You'll be relieved to hear, but I do have one other as well. But I wanted to ask maybe about the Newport 17 development that is in this specific plan area, and maybe people who've been around can weigh in on this. It looked to me, and it was also in the map, that the Newport 17, which I assume means there's 17 units on it, uses up 4 parcels. And you can actually see the 4 parcels, I think, on your map. One of which is 10,000 square feet. And it looks like it's probably going to be like the entryway into where the apartments are. So in that situation, it looks to me, in this specific plan area, we have developed a multifamily development on 4 parcels. Yeah, we couldn't do anything with the 10,000 one, but there were 3 next door to it that allowed us to build 17 apartments. So the concern I kind of have that Commissioner Mead expressed is, in these other situations, I know there might not be anything in the timeline, in the pipeline, but here's an example in this very specific, specific plan area where we managed to build 17 multifamily units in 4 parcels. And here we have the specific parcel we're talking about is next door to 2 other parcels. And if they were somehow consolidated, could we do another Newport 17? The potential is there. Maybe that's not going to happen, but we're closing off the potential, it feels to me, if we were to do this. That could be another Newport 17-like development. And also with the other 2 on Ortega Road, there's those 2 small parcels, but next door to it is a larger parcel. And if we take those 2 off the table, we're left with the 1 smaller parcel. So, yeah, I have a concern about us removing potential multifamily parcels where we have a specific example where it worked, and elsewhere in this area, we're going to close the door on that. I don't know, can you give me comfort on that? Anyway,
Well,
but that's a concern of mine. I'm a bit wary about it.
I would say we're certainly not closing the door on it. This amendment does not mean multifamily is not permitted here. It just
Right.
means that single-family dwellings can be constructed.
And one will be
And
constructed in
one will
this
be.
area.
The general plan includes a couple policies, including 2 that I listed in the staff report that are discussing, supporting both infill development and lot consolidation. So this amendment is sort of supporting the infill development side, while to your point, it's not leaning on the lot consolidation. But because this corridor is sort of a mix of developed and undeveloped properties, staff was of the opinion that some of these sites might be challenging for lot consolidation due to surrounding developments. Not to say it would be necessarily impossible, but they're not all necessarily easy candidates for that either.
But not just looking at this specific lot, on the previous screen you had up, there's those lots at the bottom where there's 2 and then there's 3, right?
Yep.
So if someone builds a single-family home on one of those lots, now that can't be consolidated.
Exactly right.
Which means now you have to have single-family home on the other one. So, I mean, even though the change isn't going to be saying, well, you can't have multifamily on those lots. If someone builds on the middle of one of those three, now you definitely can't.
Right.
Just practically.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not quite there, I'm afraid, because that is a concern of mine, that we've done 17 through 4 small parcel consolidations, and we would be shutting the door on maybe 2 other multifamily developments in this area. Maybe they'll never happen, but we're certainly going to shut the door if we do this. I'm not quite sure.
If I could add just one more thing.
Yes.
Excuse me for interrupting, but so it's hard to see, but these 2 are the other 2 highlighted on that map. So
Yes.
potentially these 2 could still be consolidated. The
And the
development
one
of
below.
this site does not necessarily preclude those 2 from being consolidated.
There's 3 below it that are all RM. There's 1, 2, 3.
However, yeah, that's true. This one
Yeah.
is larger than the
Yes.
10,000 square
Yeah.
feet, so it's,
And, we talked about, not having entryway onto arterials like Date Palm. So, I guess in that case, it could be Rancho Vista Drive, but it could also, if that was all consolidated, they could have an exit onto Olancha Road as well, because that's exactly what happened with the Newport 17 development, is that one of those small parcels gave them an entrance onto Rancho Vista Drive. So, I have a concern, and I'm not sure where I'm going to go with this yet. The other question I had came up in your presentation was in relation to, and you refresh my memory, you were saying that this used to be, you used to be able to do single-family housing in this specific plan area, but then we changed it for the housing element. What was that discussion
so this is
again?
something Director Firestein discovered this afternoon. So in the housing element, I think it's in Table 41, it has a table showing types of residential uses permitted in each zone. And that table, in fact, shows that single-family dwellings are permitted in the RM district.
Okay.
In 2022, a zoning ordinance amendment was adopted that was meant to support the implementation of the housing element.
Right.
And in that zoning ordinance amendment, one of the changes included striking out one-family dwellings from the RM district. Now, that amendment did not consider potentially the implications for these lots that are non-conforming with that 20,000 square foot minimum.
So I would add to that, as I read through the staff report, as I read through all the supporting documentation for that 2022 ordinance, this was housing implementation to be consistent with state law. This change was not made to be consistent with state law. Single family in the RM zone is okay. So this change was not made
Okay.
along with
That was
those other
exactly
changes.
where I was going with this.
There were other changes made too. This was as a result of the general plan. It was general plan implementation, and it was also considered a comprehensive update of the municipal code. So as we look through this many-page ordinance, you can see what was struck. And there were changes throughout the RM zoning district. Many of those were to be consistent with state law, but single-family zoning clearly was struck at that time as a permitted use. There's no explanation for the change in the staff report. There's no explanation for the change in any of the documentation.
So we did not change the RM designation allowing single family. We didn't take that out so that we could get the housing element passed. And now we're going to put it back in.
The change was not made in order to adopt and certify the housing element.
I didn't want us to reverse ourselves and get into trouble or something. That's all I have on this, but I have my concerns.
Could we go back to the slide with the table?
Yeah.
And so, okay, I think the bell finally went off. So I understand it now. My policy question then, now that I understand the math, is I think we need to do something. You shouldn't leave anybody out in the dark that just can't do anything. But I've seen other ordinances where there was incentives to consolidate lots to facilitate more multiple family development, which I think you were talking about. And I may have missed it when I was struggling with the math. Is that something that we will address in the future?
I would strongly encourage that. I think that is an excellent subject for the Development Code update. I think it's something that we can look to with the Development Code update consultant to see how other communities have incentivized lot consolidation, have incentivized greater densities. I think that is an excellent question. I would say that it is beyond the scope of what we're trying to accomplish here. At least what we've framed for the Planning Commission as part of the Zoning Code update was a narrow amendment to address 7 undeveloped parcels within the RM to allow for some minimal use of the property, recognizing that we still need to have a broader discussion. And I think we can do that through the Development Code update.
So that's something that we can address on the zoning committee, is the lot consolidation. Okay, and thank you for your suggestion on the rounding, which made the bell go off.
All right. I just, so, I know you've heard enough about this already, but you mentioned in the general plan that there is a table that shows that single-family homes were allowed in RM.
That was in the housing element.
So now I'm having problems again, because that suggests that RM in general should be allowing this, not a specific plan.
So the housing element was pointing to the zoning district, the RM zoning district, and said that single-family dwellings are permitted. The general plan land use designation, which is confusingly also RM, but the general plan land use designation does include single-family dwellings as a product type that you see in that land use designation, and that is still in place. So right now, the zoning district sort of more narrowly defines what can be developed in the RM than the general plan. That finding in the housing element, I don't think it has a bearing on the specific plan, which prohibits currently single-family dwellings.
Okay. And to sort of address the general question that came up, we're trying to help somebody, just in this one instance. Really, that's what this is about. So I'm wondering, are there any other methods by which we could have accomplished the same thing, like a variance, a CUP, or anything like that?
This product is what staff came up with as the minimal solution to address the problem. And we stepped through whether we could repeal the entire specific plan, whether we would need to amend the specific plan. We looked at various iterations of the lot size, how large should that number be? And I would say that what Ms. Camps has presented this evening is the minimal change needed to effectuate the outcome that is recommended by staff. We're trying to support a property owner processing a single-family permit. I recognize there may be unintended consequences of this until we can come back before you again with the Development Code update. But what we have presented this evening is the minimal scope to effectuate that outcome. Okay. You could not process a use variance for single family. That's not something that we could do. There's not an allowance for a conditional use.
I have a suggestion. I don't know if it would be better to wait to make an amendment to the motion, but should I throw it out there now? What I think would be a way to narrow this further, which would be to keep exactly what you're saying, but it only applies if the 2 adjacent properties are already developed. So that narrows down the scope to literally just her property, while those 2 that are horizontal below now don't fall into this case, because Not both of them are developed, which means that we're not allowing someone to build a single-family home on that center one and then take that whole lot away from being consolidated. It just seems like it would narrow the scope further, still allow her to proceed, but then give us the time to figure out, as part of the development code update, what we actually want to do as a city and as housing strategy.
I would be supportive of that if it's possible when we get to that point.
So your friendly amendment would be, let's go,
Both the lots on subsequent, on.
no, I understand that part. Go back, let's go to the slide with the exact language. Okay.
So just to share some thoughts on that, and I've asked our legal counsel.
I'm just trying to be creative.
I appreciate that. So what we're trying to avoid is spot zoning. We're trying to avoid a situation where we're granting a special privilege or permission to one property owner over other similarly situated property owners. Essentially, we're enhancing the value of her property and no other property that also has an RM zone
Yes,
may be of the same
But
size.
we're not specifically picking her out. I'm saying if you have a 10,000 square foot lot that is developed on both sides of you, you have much more limit unless you're going to tear those buildings down. But if there's multiple,
I understand. I'm just sharing what we were trying to avoid was a situation where we're creating spot zoning. So we'll see if we can give legal counsel a little bit of time to react to that.
okay.
What situation, okay, so if we went with Commissioner Mead's suggestion as an amendment to the proposed code, what can of worms would that open?
I think it's just what I said. If we're creating a situation where we've enhanced or if we've spot zoned her property, granted her a special permission or a privilege that other property owners do not enjoy, it could potentially be challenged by one of the other property owners that have a similar sized lot in the RM zone district. And that's where we're trying to craft the language for the amendment a little bit more broadly. 7 properties would be affected by this change, as opposed to narrowing it down to just one. We're trying not to create a special privilege or permission for that one property owner.
Which I get. I guess I'm just coming at it from it's just a happy accident, frankly, that her property is the only one that fits that thing. Because I think my concern is, we share the same concern at least, which is that there are multiple of these properties which are adjacent, and if someone builds a single-family home on one, now a multiple-family, unit can't be built. So by narrowing the scope, we're still allowing, we're not closing the door, as Commissioner McPhail said, to those being consolidated. I think that's where my suggestion is coming from. It just so happens that it helps her. But the reason it helps her is because her property is actually unique compared to all the other ones that would be affected by this. So I think it would be great for somebody to develop that lot, but I'm not trying to come up with a carve-out specifically for her, just for the record, for anyone listening. I am trying to figure out how do we narrow this down so that we're not changing the zoning on all these
I
properties.
appreciate that. And I think we are dealing with a unique circumstance and situation. And frankly, if we go back to when these lots were created, the city was very different at that point in time. And there were homes, there still are, on arterial highways, but our community is a very different community today.
Let me just say, I understand the problem that we're facing here, and so this does leave more latitude for changes to these other lots. But right now they're not developed, and they haven't been developed for years. And I think it's unlikely, it may happen, but I think it's unlikely that 6 more people are going to come in and also want to develop a single-family home on a 10,000 square foot lot.
But if we say it's allowed, why wouldn't they? Right now, it's not allowed.
In the next year. Yeah. So it seems unlikely to me. It may happen. And I appreciate the need for multiple family homes. We should have smaller lot sizes. I agreed with the Rio Vista plan, which reduced lot sizes down to 5,000 square feet. And increases by doing that density. But You know, in this particular instance, I'm not sure that we should be trying to go through too many hoops here on this one case. I would just support the proposal as presented by staff.
Can I ask a moment of clarity? Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
The development that is being proposed, the single-family residence, is that a true single-family? Is there an ADU? Is there anything that is part of that specific plan? Have you seen any designs or anything like that?
So it's a colleague of mine that was processing the plan check when he realized that it wouldn't be permitted right now, but I don't believe that an ADU was part of the building plans. It's just one.
That's a
one
bummer, because that would provide density. It is, I mean, this one particular lot, it is joined by 3, so you still have the rest of all the other 6 lots still are 2, 2, and 2. So there is the opportunity to still have higher density if the lots were joined. I love that we're talking about density and all that kind of stuff, so I'm done.
I don't know, yeah, I think,
Well, sorry. Hold on. Were you finished? Do we know the size of the 2 southerly lots near the Field of Dreams?
So these 2 lots? Or?
Yes.
Ooh. I believe that they are, in fact, I do. So all 7 of these lots highlighted in blue are exactly 0.22 acres. So they're all the same lot size. They're different configurations, but they're all the same size. So they are that 9,500 square feet approximately.
Okay. And my other question, now that I've passed the arithmetic, I believe, a question for our city attorney, isn't there there's a law that states that you can build a single-family house on any lot of record, but I think the times that becomes a challenge is when you have something that's like a 5-acre minimum and they subdivided it into a 1/4 acre in the 20s, you still have to let them build a single-family lot, but then it's a single-family neighborhood. If it was multiple family, then you'd have the same problem we're having now. Is that correct?
That's a great question. I'm not familiar with that state law, but I can see if I can find it and follow up with you. Yeah.
I thought you could build a single-family home on any lot that you own. That's a property right in the United States, basically, if the zoning's right for residential.
That's kind of what I don't want to throw away the baby with the bathwater, but I'm just trying to understand. I don't want to discourage lot consolidation, but I think if we go back to the idea, similar to theoretically when we discussed the apartments on Date Palm Drive, when we first started talking about those, why would we remove commercial? And we had a long talk about that, and it's like, well, we have to have a different mindset now. It hasn't developed for 20 years under commercial. We need to have more residential. You know, it's a different mindset in how we should think about that. So here, I think the mindset maybe is that, like Commissioner Lee was saying, we have 6 lots, which isn't really going to take away or change anything citywide, but it would give these 6 people the ability to build a single-family house if they choose to do so, until we're able to do a more permanent fix. And I think that removes the special privilege.
So I want to provide a little bit of an update. So the legal counsel is researching the latest question, but building on some of the previous comments. To overcome the challenge of spot zoning, if there is public interest in doing so, you may be able to support that. So I think that the discussion that you're having on lot consolidation and preserving opportunities for lot consolidation, that may be sufficient to overcome that barrier. So I think the suggestion that Commissioner Mead put out to add an additional qualification that this only apply in cases where the adjacent properties are developed, that may be sufficient public interest to overcome that challenge, in the sense that you are working to preserve opportunities for lot consolidation.
And again, because this is going to be revisited in the next year anyway, I guess I'm just trying to avoid us doing a Band-Aid fix that then someone maybe starts planning, they start thinking they're going to, and then we change it again, right, in a year. So to avoid that kind of situation.
And for any comfort for the group, single family was allowed up until 2022. I think that's our discovery this afternoon. So it's a short period of time where it's been disallowed. This is the one instance that we've encountered where we've run into a challenge. But for the city's history, with the RM zoning, as we know, it was allowed in the RM zoning. And to Commissioner Lee's point, the properties haven't developed over that period of time, and we've only seen limited interest in the period where they've been prohibited. This is the only case where we've encountered this challenge, encountered this problem. So from staff's perspective, the risk is minimal. It's a quick fix. This is not our preferred way of doing public policy, and I would say the Development Code update is a more appropriate forum for the deeper, broader discussions, and we very much support those.
So if we were to adopt Commissioner Mead's suggestion, the lot on Olancha could be developed because it has development on both sides, but the two lots to the south could not be. They would
It
have,
could be developed with multifamily or consolidated.
or
but
they would have to consolidate.
I mean, basically, the idea is to say, for any lot that has the potential of being part of a consolidated larger lot, we would not give this privilege. It would only be if there is no ability for it to consolidate because there are no consolidatable adjacent properties.
Well, I think we've,
I mean, I can make it as a formal amendment, we can vote on it, since I know there's mixed opinions, and then we can, right?
well, I think we have to have a motion on the floor before you,
And it's a public hearing, so you need to open it up to them.
that is correct. But we would have, after we open the public hearing and take public testimony, I guess if you wanted to make a motion that was different than the recommended motion, we could do that if there was a second, and then it would either pass or fail. Okay.
Yeah, there should be no issue with that.
All right, so I think we've discussed this more than any of us thought we would. So why don't we open the public hearing? If anybody is here that would like to speak on this matter.
Do we have anyone in the audience wishing to make a public comment on this item?
Come up, please.
Yes, it is translator.
Just one moment, Chair. Staff is
Why
checking.
don't we take a 3-minute break so that,
I think they'll get it sorted out.
okay.
I think staff is just conferring with the applicant whether or not they want to speak.
She can speak using a translator if she would like.
Can you say that to the microphone so everybody online can hear it too?
Thank you. Okay, my English is not really well, but I'm going to try to speak to you. First, thank you so much for taking the time to speak about my situation. Thank you very much. And I hope you have a good resolution for me. And I hope the best. And thank you very much again. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
Okay, so I can, where is you have the original motion, don't you? Do we have the original motion?
It's on the,
Oh, here we go.
Through the chair, one way we might be able to accomplish this is if perhaps we can restate or staff can restate kind of what we think you're proposing to amend staff's recommendation. And so your motion would be to,
Yeah, I was just going to add basically where it says do not have frontage on an arterial highway, to just add there, and do not, how to say it, I'm not sure if I say, and do or do not?
do not have
And do not have,
development on either side.
no, and who do have development,
They do have,
yeah,
that have development on either
Potential.
side.
Or at least two sides.
yeah, that where the two adjacent properties are. Dom, are you trying to help? I feel like it could just be added in one spot, just to clarify.
I was just going to add that I think it should specify on two adjacent sides.
Yes.
Because in this instance, some properties have three adjacent properties. So
Right, yeah, I was going to
specify
say two adjacent sides, yeah. So, no greater than 10,000 square feet with developed properties on two adjacent sides and that do not have frontage on an arterial highway?
Okay, why don't we, can we take a straw poll as to whether this is sufficient to move forward? A straw vote
yes?
is, so that means just, we could informally say whether we support the amendment or not, and then we know whether we could go forward. If- Commissioner Bedard? Commissioner Lee?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
You can say no, you don't have to be, you're allowed to have a different opinion.
Go ahead. You're obviously yes, and then.
Yeah. Yeah, so, okay, so if we just basically change the existing motion to add that one caveat in that one sentence, then that would,
Yeah, so through the chair, Commissioner Meady, what you could do is make a motion to
Amend.
approve staff's recommendation with the amendment, and then
Okay.
you don't have, I think as long as it's clear what the amendment is, you don't necessarily have to restate the whole thing.
Okay.
But if you want to, you certainly can.
so then I move that we adopt the staff's recommendation with the limitation that that this only applies to properties where two adjacent lots are already developed. Is that good enough? And
Second.
then you can figure the wording, there, yeah?
I'm just looking at Dom, is that clear enough? Okay, great.
Okay.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, let the record show a motion was made by Commissioner Mead, seconded by Commissioner McPhail to approve item 3A with the added amendment as noted for the record. Motion passes.
Okay, now we can, does everybody want to take a small break before Eric does his two presentations, or have Eric do one presentation and?
Okay. We normally.
I'm good.
I think we can go till 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have our non-public hearing items, economic development update, strategic partnerships, auto industry analysis and develop dashboard tools. Mr. Becquerel.
Hi, good evening, Chair Malakoff and the Planning Commission. I'm going to pull up the presentation here. very exciting topics that we're talking about today, and going to continue that dialogue. So we're going to shift gears a little bit, and at the end, if anybody has questions, I'm happy to entertain. But I am Eric Besser, I'm the Economic Development Manager, and today I want to give you all some insight to some of the things that Economic Development has been working over the last several months. So some of the things that I'll touch on are a scholarship we received with Team California, a SWOT analysis that we are working with a consultant to accomplish, and business support programs, as well as the development dashboard. So first and foremost, one of the things that I really like are things that are free for our residents, for our community, and this is one that I'm really proud of. This is a scholarship that I applied for in behalf of Cathedral City to receive some assistance as we look forward to explore different ideas and ways to incentivize economic development in our community. So this scholarship with Team California was one that we went through the process and applied for, and it's actually called the AHEAD Initiative Scholarship. The award really circles around ways to support communities that have a need for economic development and, obviously a desire because they've applied. So we have, as a Cathedral City, have not been part of Team California historically, at least not in this capacity as members. So when you look at the membership levels, the one that we received was the Platinum, which is a $20,000 value. And with that, I'm very excited to obviously utilize this resource for our residents, for our business owners. With it comes a multitude of opportunities that are free to us, economic development, to tap into and utilize. We actually just had our onboarding with Team California, and so with this, we have a series of benefits that include announcements, really promoting the community and promoting the different development opportunities that we have. And this includes statewide trade shows, investor outreach events, site selector events, and we have kind of a firsthand sort of approach at a lot of these, at least for the next year. So very excited to utilize a lot of these resources and really just continue to bring all that we can with what we have in our budget, and just be cautious of how we spend our funds. So this was one, it was out there, so might as well apply it and look at where we are now. We're able to tap into the resource. So excited to bring you all, and that'll be kind of its own thing, and I'll bring forward some updates as we move along with Team California. So moving into the next part, we have a very strong automotive dealership presence here in Cathedral City. All of you know historically we've been able to work with the auto dealers and really support them in all of their endeavors. So as we see other neighboring communities work towards achieving their goals with the automotive industry, well, we want to maintain our stance as being at the forefront of the industry and really help our members, our dealerships stay ahead. So part of what we do is we attend a monthly meeting with the Cathedral City Auto Centers, and we do as well communicate with all of the auto dealers that are not necessarily part of that center. But in those discussions, when we talk about legislation and all of the ever-moving parts that they face on a day-to-day basis, it was very evident that we needed to address and work on ways to ensure that we maintain our stance in the automotive world, considering we rely and have a big tax presence in that. So we have consulted with Cosmont to conduct a SWOT analysis, and that is a strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats analysis. Other cities have performed that, their own internal. This, due to the magnitude of the industry here, it's valid to go and get a consultant. So we had an RFP, we had Cosmont apply, and we awarded them the contract. They started their analysis 2 weeks ago by meeting with the auto dealers and actually engaging and starting to really hammer down the everything that's going to fall within that report. Once that report is concluded, we will bring that forward. We're going to share that with the auto dealers as well as the commissions and city council. So this one's really exciting. As we look at different resources that our community needs, we start realizing that there are specific markets here and there are specific clusters that we have to address their needs. Well, how do we do that is to really diversify our investments that we have. And in doing so, we have started contracting with the Coachella Valley Women's Business Center. They're operating out of the ERC, the Entrepreneurship Resource Center, there in Palm Desert. And we have also contracted with Riverside County Office of Economic Development, who also oversees the Small Business Development Center. So in this, starting in July, we will start promoting these programs. And the Coachella Valley Women's Business Center, they will be offering one-on-one consulting every week for a year. So that's a really amazing resource. And I think that it's important to note that when we talk to these organizations, we express our budget constraints. We express where we really want to leverage our relationship with them, but the only way to do so is they work with us. And these are experts that are in the industry, and they know Cathedral City, they know the area, but they also know that their investment with our community is valuable, and the residents deserve it, the business owners deserve it, and we're excited to bring that. So a lot of times we deal with business owners that aren't able to attend a one-off meeting because, well, a lot of times the business owner is running the business. So what did we do? Well, we decided to work with the Coachella Valley Women's Business Center, so they will be coming here to City Hall. We're going to have a space for them every week. They'll be able to come here, and every business owner that's either active in Cathedral City, interested in coming to Cathedral City, can schedule an appointment, and every week we will have a rotating consultant that is an expert in a different field. So we want to be able to cover all of the different business types that we have here in Cathedral City, and that is one way that we're going to do that. The other is working with the Riverside County Office of Economic Development to create a comprehensive business training program that's really driven around who we are and what the fabric of the business community is here in Cathedral City. A lot of times we hear, like, if you go on Perez Road, you can see a lot of people make things here. They are not only artists in their own respect, but they're actually, as I walk to Mr. Zebra to grab a sandwich, you can see all of the different types of businesses that we have here. Very creative individuals. Well, how do we help address them? So we worked with Riverside County, expressed and showed all of the different types of businesses that we have in our community, and they were able to create our own sort of unique business template of different types of programs that we're going to offer. And these are multi-week programs. So aside from the one-on-one business counseling, you need consistency. So one-off events sometimes aren't that. So these are 4-week programs that, again, address a variety of different things, but we also have short 90-minute workshops that will cover things that are sales, marketing, compliance with documents, things that you need, and they're all sort of outlined in the appropriate manner so that as you work on your business, you build up the business, you start getting into kind of the more specific needs that business owner is going to really need. And again, that all is going to start in the promoting of it in July and really launching in August. And lastly, I want to show the development dashboard. So part of what we're really focusing on and will continue to focus on is telling our story. And the way to tell our story is through digital platforms, through doing things like this, coming to you all and speaking to you, and ensuring that we share our wins and we share what kind of resources we have out there. So a lot of times we get questions, you'll see a construction fence go up and, hey, what's going on there? So what we've developed with the help of Victor Gomez, who isn't here, but he's listening in, I know he is this development dashboard. So I'm going to quickly show you what this is. So if you go to our website, on economic development, we have this really nifty GIS site where you can go on here and actually go through, identify a site, a project that you saw that maybe sparked your interest and you wanted to maybe learn more about, or you're an investor, you're a developer, and you want to learn, where is it that you want to develop. So as you go through, you can see, like in here, we have the Food for Less shopping center. And if you zoom in, what's really neat is at the top, you have a legend that'll tell you if it's a commercial project, a mixed-use project, or a residential project. So if you're interested in commercial, you can go on here, you can click on it, and not only does it highlight what it is, but we've added a little bit more information because, we love information, but we don't want to overwhelm you with it. So in here, you can see who they are, what they are, and even if you're interested to learn a little bit more, you want to see the site plan, I know all of you are going to love this. And here you can actually get a little bit more insight to what we have going on in the community. So let me go get out of here. And with that, that concludes my quick update here for economic development, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Does the commission have any questions for Mr. Becquerel?
Sure.
Start
Wanna start at this
with
end?
Commissioner McPhail.
I'll let one of our business people go first. I do have questions, but I'll yield to our business people
Commissioner
first.
Bedard.
All right, I was just going to say, nice job. And some of the other resources, I'm always pushing for a little more connection with our Latino community. And are you familiar with Caravanserai?
Yes, so we actually had them come and be presenters, and they're part of the SBDC. So they're an
Yes.
SBDC certified center,
Okay.
and they're all part of, under kind of that umbrella to some degree with Riverside County, which is who we're contracting with.
Great, because they work very independently. They are an SBDC, but they tend to work very independently because they are so hyperly focused on the Hispanic community.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering so they're just going to be an ancillary that's come in now and then, because to hook in with them, they're doing some amazing things out in Desert Hot Springs, super connected to a lot of the Latin Hispanic community, and I think that's one of our weaknesses, to have more connection with one of our largest population bases. I'm wondering if there's a way, like, I would have rather seen Caravanserai SBDC instead of Inland Empire SBDC.
So to that point, great point. I agree. The Latino community should get some representation. The good start on that is hiring an economic development manager que habla español. So that does help. So with that, so to your point, with the Coachella Valley Women's Business Center, we want to elevate obviously our community, but to your point, with Spanish-speaking community, the precious thing about that and the Riverside County Small Business Development Center is they both have Spanish-speaking individuals, and that's one thing that we wanted to make sure from the beginning, that we address that, because we agree with you, and as we do, Victor and I, when we first started, we went and introduced ourselves and invited around 200 businesses, so definitely got my steps in, right? So we invited them to the small bit, but that was one of the things that we realized was, well, we have a lot of Spanish-speaking business owners, so want to make sure that we address their needs, and again, that's one thing that we will have as an offering with these services, but we will continue to explore ways to collaborate, and there are many ways, so as you all think of those, feel free to share them with Andy and I, and Andy, it sounds like he wants to chime in.
I do. I want to add a little bit of
Yes, of
context
course.
here, too. So Eric is not even at his 1-year anniversary with the city. And I think as he came into the city, he had scarce resources available to him to do the work that he has done. And he's done an excellent job with the limited resources he has. Council at their last meeting adopted a budget for the upcoming 2 years. And I think in that budget, we have proposed the changes that he is sharing with you now. And really this allows economic development staff to take a little bit more control over the resources and how we're allocating those resources within the Cathedral City community. So what Eric has shared with you really is what I would refer to as a pilot. This is an opportunity for us to look at what we can do with these partners, with this partnership, and we're learning as we go. So he is very excited. I'm very excited about the programs and the services that we're looking to offer starting July 1 as we kick off the new fiscal year, and we're continuously looking to do more. So as we learn from this, we can make changes, we can make modifications. We're looking to be responsive to the Cathedral City community, to the businesses here, and Eric and I both are looking for ways to continue to evolve and modify the program to be as responsive as we can.
Commissioner Lee?
Yes, well, you just made my day when you showed me a little database there, GIS mapping. One of the things I get asked most often outside of here by members of the public is, when is X going to open? You know, and so now I can point them at that database and say, I don't know, why don't you go look it up yourself? So, no, that is great. Just a couple of minor points from your staff report. You mentioned at the beginning that you were moving to measurable economic outcomes, and I wondered what you meant by that.
I am so glad you said that. You know, how do you know that you're doing well if you don't have a measurement, you don't have a baseline, right? That's a really good point. So one of the requirements that we had as we explored who we were going to try to contract with was deliverables, right? So both Riverside County Office of Economic Development, being connecting and obviously overseeing the Small Business Development Center, as well as the Coachella Valley Women's Business Center that works in conjunction with and actually is overseen by CSUSB. Every single individual that goes through their resource, that even picks up the phone, that comes in and meets with them, is tracked from the time that they step there all the way to the very end. Not only that, but there's follow-up. And all of this is going to be reported to us, so we're actually going to be able to come back to you and not only just share the data, the stats, but one of the things we wanted to do was them to track the actual story of these individuals, where they're coming from, who are they, and how can we help them. A lot of individuals, we are the most diverse city in the Coachella Valley. We have people from all over the world that are coming here. So we want to make sure that that there isn't an excuse for us to not make sure that we keep track of their reporting. So in that, I can actually tell you the types of deliverables that they will provide. What's on this one? So the reporting that they're going to provide is attendance tracking through program participation, again, which means that the time that they call, come in, schedule, anything like that. Outcome tracking, which includes the business start. So not only did they just come and get an idea, but did they sign a lease? Because these organizations both have the resources to help guide them, hold their hand through that entire process. So what we're doing is, this is something that I just absolutely love hearing in our department, is a multiplying factor, and that's what this is. So I can't, and Victor and I are a team of 1.5, and I do have to answer the phone, I do have to kind of respond. So how do we leverage ourselves? This is how. This is how we can be at places when we can't be, and this is how we can speak languages that sometimes we are unable to. So this is a way that we're able to do that. Really roll out being an inclusive type of business community. This is the way to do it, and this is a way that we're doing it in a very budget cautious manner, so that we understand that this is a pilot, like Andy said. We're going to track and hold accountable these sort of outcomes, but at the same time we are that is something that was at the front when we had these conversations, and to us was critical before we signed any sort of agreement with them.
Great. So something else you mentioned was that there's a current contract with Coachella Valley Chamber of Commerce, and that's coming to an end. And that's going to allow resources to be redeployed. And I'm wondering what that means. Is that money or people or what?
So that is. So part of that is there was a contract in place, and not to get too far into the everything on it, I want to just kind of leave you with, there was a set budget amount. That budget amount included a variety of different things that aren't even just business sort of resources. They were event-type services. And so there is a separate contractor that was awarded those event-type services, which sort of, in a sense, that same contract wouldn't really even be in place. And so, I guess to answer your point, when we say redeploy, is when we say business support, this is a way that we say, so in those contracts, when we read the verbiage such as business support, entrepreneurship resources, things of that nature, educational events, that's where we said, okay, well, we need to tap in and collaborate with organizations that do offer that and are experts in that field and have been for a long time.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Mead.
First of all, super exciting. I think this is all great. I love the focus on data and numbers and outcomes. I went through a training program a couple years ago, and every time we had a seminar, we had to take a survey at the end. We had to actually say, what have we used the skills for? How are we using the skills? How will we use the skills? They're very focused on outcomes. And I think that that's great because especially since this is a pilot, you're going to be able to see which things produce the best outcomes and then say, let's put more money into those and not into the things that maybe didn't work as well. I've heard incredible things about the Coachella Valley Women's Business Center. They're a group that I keep meaning to reach out to at being a woman business owner in the Coachella Valley. The only thing I would suggest is you mentioned that you were going to be doing these you mentioned how business owners often can't come to things because they're working. This is a problem I face personally. If you can have those kind of seminars and things at different times on different days, just instead of it's always Tuesday from 12 to 4 or something, you'll get a wider variety of people just because of that. Some people work nights, some people work mornings, different businesses have different hours. So I just hope you take that into account and kind of have a different schedule maybe so different people can take advantage. But I'm super excited about this. I think it's a great use of the money that's getting freed up, and just great job.
Thank you. And I didn't touch on this, but the Coachella Valley Women's Business Center, they do not solely focus on women businesses.
Yes, correct.
That is one of their strengths, but they most definitely help a variety of business owners. So I appreciate that. And, to your point about maybe finding other locations, that's one thing that we talked about. We said, hey, is there a way that we can maybe find small businesses here locally? Maybe we have one day that we have it at Luchador, or we have it at Hot Lips, or Trilusa, or somewhere that they are maybe can grab lunch while we're there. So we are exploring those things and exploring ways that we both from an economic development standpoint, we incentivize and highlight a small business, but at the same time, we provide a safe space for them to be able to do that. One of the things is confidentiality, and sometimes people have ideas that they want to keep in a closed circle, so we're going to try to find those right places that have those kind of meeting rooms that they can go in and safely talk. But thank you for that comment. We are on the same page with you on that.
Commissioner McPhail.
I want to thank you for the presentation. I think we all really appreciate the energy you're bringing to your position here. It's much appreciated. I did have a question in the report in regards to the automotive industry. I think there was a line in there where you had talked to automotive companies on East Palm Canyon, and they had reported back that there were infrastructure challenges, I think, relative to places like Indio and La Quinta. Do you know what specifically they mean when they're talking about infrastructure? Is that something that the city, they want the city to do, or is it something that they need to take care of?
So these are good points, right? So, when we talk about infrastructure, it's not solely like public work or engineering type work, right? So infrastructure could be a multitude of things that they mentioned. We need better signage. We want more signage. We want to have signage that looks like La Quinta's new automotive signage. Things of that nature. There have been other types of, requests, but with that, we can't be so reactive, and we have to really analyze these requests in a very appropriate fashion, and the only way to do that is to have a comprehensive look at it so that council and all of the city management can look at where are we at? Is our historic investment sufficient can we do more in certain areas to support them? Because ultimately, part of this is, when we talk about BRE or business retention and expansion, right? It's that retention and expansion that we really want to focus on and make sure that we don't lose auto dealers, but at the same time, that they see the value of our investments. And so it's a mutual relationship. So when you say infrastructure, those are some of the things. Can we have types of, there's a multitude of things going through that list, but that's why I kind of summed it up and said, just infrastructure in general, light, electricity. As you know, everything ever changes, right? And so electricity can go up and down, and costs of different things such as advertisement fluctuates as well. So those are the types of things that when we talk about infrastructure. Now, not to say they didn't ask about projects, and John and his team with Public Works have definitely helped sort of provide data and allow and tell the story of all the types of improvements that would, in essence, affect or support the automotive industry. So continuing to tell that story and that dialogue is part of that, but that's why in general infrastructure was mentioned.
They're always looking at what their neighbors are doing. And I think
Whether
they're always looking to their neighbors and what their neighbors are getting from other cities, whether it's Indio, La Quinta, Palm Springs. They talk. They're close to other dealers. They're close to other associations. And I think they're seeing investment from other communities into other auto dealer associations, into those areas. I think they're seeing what's going on with Varner Road, with some landscape enhancements, street modifications on Varner Road. And they're looking to the city to say, where's our share? And I think from our standpoint, we have executed deals. We have done digital signs. We've done this recently. But with this SWOT analysis, I think this is a strategic way for us to say, how can we most appropriately support the auto industry here in Cathedral City to allow it to be competitive? We want it to be strong, but what is the city's most effective role? How can we play in this space? What is our impact? How do we work there?
you both mentioned signage, and I noticed, I think, on your slides, you had a little logo about Cathedral City Auto Center or something like that was one of the logos on there. And I don't know if all the different companies on East Palm Canyon use that logo a way to collectively identify themselves. Like in San Diego, there was National City Milo cars, and everyone knew what was there. And I don't know whether that's the sort of branding or presence or collective effort they're thinking of.
So, to that point, the Cathedral City Auto Center is a marketing nonprofit that works and collects fees and focuses solely on marketing. One of the challenges they're facing is with, again, the ever-changing cost of electricity and water and such. They are finding themselves maybe investing more in infrastructure type related or even utility type bills, and really or maybe aren't focusing as much in marketing. So that was a time for us to really sit down and kind of reflect on where are we at, what have we historically done, because the city's done a lot and we want to tell that story too. And as we look at ways, again, to attract even more types of auto dealers to come here and be here, this is a way to show that we are serious about that industry. I don't think I personally have seen, at least here in the Coachella Valley, this be done to this magnitude. So I think it's important. I think it's important to be the leaders in the valley to show that that industry is important to us, and we will do what we need to do to support them and identify ways to keep them afloat of challenges that they may face.
Not every dealer is part of the CCAC either, but the study, the SWOT analysis, it is looking at this comprehensively. It's not just the CCAC.
Yeah, and to that point, so we have the auto industry, and we look at East Palm Canyon, and there is a kind of a cluster there. But then as you keep going down, at the border of Rancho Mirage, you have Palm Springs Motors, and then even on Perez, right? You kind of go in that way, and you start seeing other industries, other automotive dealers that aren't necessarily part of that, and even services that are supporting the auto industry. So you start looking, it starts growing and growing. I mean, even to the point, if you really want to tie in recreational vehicle sales. We have those as well on East Palm Canyon. So those are the things that we're looking at, but we're looking at them through a very comprehensive lens, and not everyone is part of that. It is an option that people can, participate in that program to receive, I guess, the benefits that they offer. But I think this is a way to, as well, show the rest of the industry that as a collective, they're being vocal, they're speaking up, and we're working on ways to address their comments.
I also wanted to thank you for the highlighting of the development dashboard, and I've already used it in the way Commissioner Lee mentioned, where I've had questions. I said, look at this website over here, and you might find your answers. I also mentioned it at our last Planning Commission meeting. You showed an example, where there's I think maybe 4 milestones. It's like under review, project approved, under construction, completed, and sometimes, I don't know, it feels like maybe there's some steps missing that we don't quite catch to know if a development's really happening or not. Like if something's been graded and it's ready to go. Sometimes there's a big lag and people don't know that something is actually happening. I don't know if there's other milestones that can be built into it, data-driven milestones, like perhaps the city receives some sort of permit that tells you, yeah, this is really happening, and that could be added into the mix of data, or the grading permit tells us that something's really going to happen.
I love that idea, right? And it's the balance, right? Because again, just going back and not using this as an excuse whatsoever, but being a team of 1.5, right?
Yeah.
It can be a challenge, right?
Yeah.
But to your point, right? How do we effectively use this device and this software to tell our story? So we'll continue, and we'll take those comments in. And again, I know Victor's hearing. He's been really the lead on this. I want to give him a shout out.
He's doing a great job
on that. He's doing a wonderful job. We will explore ways that we can better tell the story at where that development is in its stage of development.
And I hope there's a good workflow from department to department that you will tell Victor, hey, we just got a permit for this, or this is happening, so he can update it.
So, I'm up here already, right? Why not talk about it? So we do, we have what we call a DSC, or Development Services Committee, right? Kind of a one-of-a-kind thing, to be very frank with you. But what it is kind of it's a way that we all meet, and we meet on a pretty frequent basis, and it's a representative of different departments. And this development dashboard is actually one that is permanently integrated now as part of our itinerary that we go through, and we sort of check off. Let's go through, are there any projects that maybe are in the next phase, or are there ones that we're missing and we need to add? So we have a consistent dialogue with all departments, and working for several departments or several cities. I can tell you that it's very unique in the way that they do it here, and it works really well, because the more we can talk, the less, I guess, telephone game occurs, right? And so we're all in a room, we can look at the dashboard, see where different projects are at, and really update them accordingly.
Great, because the tool's only good if it's up to date, and it sounds like you've got that under control.
That's very true. That's a
thank
good
you very
point.
much.
Commissioner Mead, you have another question?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to ask, in your conversations with the, sort of twofold, in your conversations with the auto dealers, has there been any sort of concern about tariffs impacting sales? And two, my understanding is the auto dealers and the auto industry, I guess you could say in general, are the lion's share of the sales tax that the city receives, and the city basically runs on sales tax. So it makes sense that we would want to ensure their success. But at the same time, if you're looking at a SWOT analysis, right, for them, a SWOT analysis for the city would probably show that is one of our weaknesses or our potential threats, is that if the auto industry were to suffer for any period of time, the city will lose a lot of money. So is part of what you're doing with the economic development and this whole new plan trying to build up other areas of business in the city to kind of not have all our eggs in one basket?
So to kind of touch on that is, so we are looking at, so tariffs, right? You mentioned the big T word, right? So that, when we first initially talked about this, I was about maybe 1 or 2 months in working here, and it was apparent to me, like, hey, we need to focus a little bit of attention on this industry. So a lot changed since then, right? So, that was pre-January, right? And so since then, obviously, there's been more and more ever changing, and it's just part of the evolution of industries. But it was, as we were working on doing the RFP, getting someone, I can tell you it almost just aligned so well, because as we started identifying who the consultant was going to be, what their scope was going to look like, the industry, the auto industry that we had been talking to, the group, they were very supportive, because at that time, and continuing to, right, it wasn't solely about marketing anymore. It wasn't solely about signage. It was a much bigger conversation. And so this is a way to really look at that at a really sort of, I guess, updated lens. Again, SWOT analysis and all that, they're things that you need to revisit from time to time, but there hasn't been one, so this is a way to start that, and then kind of reflect back and see ways that we can, again, prevent, right, and how do we do that? It might be policy changes, it might be other types of investments, but yes, it was something that was brought up in the conversations.
We are working towards economic diversification too, and I think much of what Eric has presented this evening speaks to that. We are a community of small businesses, and allowing those small businesses to grow and thrive is a way for us to support economic diversification.
Congratulations on your year's anniversary, and the great job that you've been doing reaching out to people and making sure that people feel included, which these days is really important, that people don't feel like they're left out. So I appreciate that part of your plan is to do that, and I agree with everything all my fellow commissioners said. Is there anybody else with any more questions or comments?
I do want to note this too, we will be concluding the contract with the chamber, but that by no means means we are not working with them. They are very much a part of our community, and we'll continue to work on ways to work with them. This is just a way for us to sort of readdress some of the concerns and needs in our community. But at the same time, I know we have a board member up in the dais here, but I do want to say that they are valued in our community. The chamber does play a role in our community. Just at this time, this is the investment opportunity that we want to take on.
Thank you. Are you ready to go on to part two?
This is my time to shine, right?
Why don't
I'm
we
excited
take
to be
a...
here. You want to take a break?
We're going to take a 5-minute break and come back at 7:58. No,
7:54.
7:54, excuse, no, 7...
5 minutes.
We'll be back in 5 minutes.
There you go.
Right.
I cannot count the break.
Oh, yeah, there are, yeah.
Well, and that's why her situation actually is unique, right? It's not like we're saying we're trying to make this something specific for her, but she is the only lot that is boxed in, which means it can't be consolidated. And nothing bigger can, I mean, behind, yeah, but I mean, it's less likely because of it. Yeah, you understand. But my point is that if we do want to develop it, but if someone brings up offering a incentive to consolidate, then maybe people would do that. It just seems, from the get-go, putting aside everything else, all of
Yes, I mean, he said there were some that were reasonable, some that are pretty odd, and some that should just be deleted.
needed, probably. Probably so much has been changed over that time.
Maybe 6, 2 or something.
Yeah.
They were written 40 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Uptown Village.
We do, Maria Vista, and Maria Vista Village, pretty much tore up the old specific plan and wrote it.
It's 7:54, so I'd like to call the meeting back to order.
Let me resume the video, Chair. One moment.
Oh, good, they don't see us all standing up here chatting.
So we're on to our next non-public hearing item, housing production strategy, element and strategic plan implementation, and housing as an economic development director. Mr. Beccaro, once again.
Hi, good evening, everyone. We are going to go in and talk about affordable housing, and I'm going to, I want to kind of come at this from a lens of, this is I try to use every opportunity, you can tell, as some form of education opportunity, way to have dialogue. So this is a way to sort of continue working collaboratively as a whole. You all are a governing body that oversees, you just talked about housing, right? So we're going to go into a little bit, and I look forward to the dialogue at the end of the presentation. So purpose of this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about, market rate versus affordable income limits. We hear the word RHNA, I mentioned it so much, rural housing needs allocation. We'll look at the city's progress, which we attached a presentation that was the Housing Element Annual Progress Report. The reason we attached it is it is very extensive, but there is a lot of good information in there. I won't repeat the presentation. It was done very well. So, but we'll touch on that. We'll also look at the strategic plan and the housing element. We, again, just had dialogue on the housing element, talk about a little bit about financing, kind of what that looks like, and the overall legislative role in all of this. So, I think that's not the one. Okay, so the income limits for Riverside County is, as you note here, this came from the Department of Housing and Community Development. You can see that the median income for a 4-person family is a $97,500. So being that the baseline of when you talk about AMI, right, that area median income, that's the baseline number. So not to go into that, that's, again, in the other presentation, there's much more dialogue, much more information, and even the housing element, right, can really go into the weeds on all of this. So as we look at what is affordable, what it really is, it really boils down to the cost burden on housing. So, and obviously every family is different, but when you look at it, this kind of gives you a sort of generic breakdown of what that looks like. The less you have, the more you spend on housing, that's a percentage of your income, the less you have for all the other things that you need to as well purchase and maintain. So when we look at the regional housing needs assessment, it's calculated by the state. This is mandated by housing law, and it really quantifies how many homes and the types of homes that different areas, different cities should be developing in a certain planning period. Currently, we're in the 6th cycle, and again, earlier this year there was a Housing Element Annual Progress Report that was presented to Council. Looking at the statistics of our community, we are in 2020 we came out to about 51,000. Of the 51,000, 63% being owner occupied and 37% being renter occupied. Here we have the entire number that was allocated to Cathedral City being 2,549. And that is the breakdown here below of the different AMIs of those types of homes. So the housing element plays a role in all of this, as we cities are required to adopt a housing element and have what they call a housing element in compliance. So I'm glad you all had previously the other staff report. You guys talked about it a little bit, so that's important. Every year we have to submit a progress report showing what have we done, what is our progress, and that all helps us maintain the certification. Why is this important? There are different mechanisms that are in place that the state of California has, where different developers can sort of tap into these sort of types of, what you would call it, laws, where you can actually develop a number of types of projects without any sort of, or very minimal intervention or suggestions, recommendations from the city. So one of those being Builder's Remedy. And so Builder's Remedy is a legal tool that allows developers to bypass local zoning and general plan regulations. So you all, again, had dialogue about that. What we do and what we're looking at here is how do we continue to maintain that certification, right? It's really showing progress, showing that we are adhering ourselves to the housing element, in order to prevent this, because ultimately the Builder's Remedy was designed to penalize cities that don't meet these planning requirements. And then ultimately they grant developers a sort of streamlined process to bring forward any type of project, and it's expedited. And as we continue to see laws and legislation evolve around housing, we are seeing more and more attention, especially in California, on housing, making it more flexible, more leaving more opportunities for different housing types to be developed. So in this, you look at the AMI, so one of the things that we continue to look for is ways to develop these types of homes, and a lot of these are these are all deed restricted homes to some degree, right? It's except above moderate income. So Builder's Remedies examples, here we have different ways that it can affect a community. So I encourage you, please feel free to look at the news and different news articles that reflect on the different, dialogues around builder's remedy. But in essence, here's an example. Santa Barbara, there was one that a development was opposed to go right behind it, things like that maybe affect cultural sensitivity to a community or the fabric of that community. Others being maybe safety concerns that the community may have for a variety of reasons. So things like that, are important to sort of just monitor and see what other cities are facing. So within our housing element, the way that we continue to show progress to the state is to follow our programs and show progress towards the programs, not only the housing numbers, which are ultimately one of the most important factors, but also the intent behind and the sort of progress behind some of these programs. So going into program 1A4, inclusion of affordable housing, including units targeted for extremely low, very low, low, and moderate income. And I won't go through all of them, but as you can see, there's things such as providing technical assistance, looking at ways that we create new parcels. You guys just talked about that, right? Continuing to do these types of programs are what shows progress to the in the housing element annual progress report. One of the tools that's used by cities throughout California is the pro-housing designation, and that's just, I put it up here because, as we look at ways to sort of navigate this ever-evolving housing sort of world, we want to figure out how do we work towards achieving that RHNA? How do we get those housing numbers here? Again, ultimately, that is the goal, and so this is just one type of program out there that we are looking at. Is this something that maybe we can have dialogue on in the future? And in our strategic plan, we do have a goal F to have an embrace an inclusive community. So the RHNA production comparison in here, I'm noting from the staff report from the annual progress report, up to date, we've had about 15% of the units that are in our RHNA be developed. So as you look at this chart, we have 2024 to date 373, and leaves us still with a remaining 2,176 units to develop. So if you look at the top, you see the RHNA cycle. So this RHNA cycle started in 2021, and it concludes in 2029. And so us as staff, it's important as we look at maintaining the control needed so you all can do your positions, and again, staff can do their jobs and ensure that we grow in a progressive and a sustainable manner that's, again, taking into account all the factors that we have adopted over the years that sort of overall tell the story and create the culture and, again, fabric of the community. How do we maintain that? Well, it's looking at ways that we incentivize the different types of development that is deed restricted and meets those affordability levels. So from hindsight, you can see that we do have a lot of housing. We do have a lot of housing being developed in our community. This housing is market rate. And one positive thing that I can note on this is we are still one of the more affordable places, but as we continue to see more and more increases in costs and the fluctuation of different material types and accessibilities, we're seeing these sort of costs continue to increase. So maintaining and figuring out ways to first maintain and protect the existing affordable housing, but also incentivize new affordable housing. So in this chart here, that again was out of the annual progress report, you can see that yes, we had about the 300 and so units. Of those that are meeting or adhering to the extremely low, very low, low, and moderate income, we have a total of 57, and that's as of 2023 of the APR. And so when you look at and these are permitted, these are permitted. And so when we created this chart, planning did, to really show the comparison amongst the other cities. So it's important to note that, right? We are at 57. Our neighbors in Palm Desert are at 670. Indio, 398. Palm Springs, just to the other side, 500. So again, looking at ways that how do we incentivize these types of developments, these types of housing types that are part of our housing element is important. So in that, I know that maybe one of the overarching questions is, well, let's just get it built. Let's do it. And this important part right here is really help sort of define what that looks like. So California, it uses a multifaceted approach at ways that it funds affordable housing. And that includes state programs that are like the low-income housing tax credit. You hear it so often, LIHTC. This is a very common program that is used to develop affordable housing. Along with that are other types of programs, federal funds, bonds, grants, so on and so forth, that are used to leverage and support affordable housing. There are often times in developments where public subsidies and private investments, along with philanthropic donations, things of that nature, and even partnerships, they help sort of facilitate and create those relationships that are needed to bring the financing to the table and actually develop this. So most housing types, I would say all housing types, to some degree or another, the developer is going to look for a profit. Even affordable housing, right? We use the word affordable, but no one is going to come forward, and it's just putting it out there. No one is going to come forward and develop a project that they're already maybe in the red on, right? So how do they get out of that, right? It's that gap. It's how do we subsidize the difference of what market rate is to the different affordability levels, which can range, right? Anywhere from extremely low to moderate. And so looking at that gap, they use different ways to complete it, utilizing things like the LIHTC or low-income housing tax credit, because ultimately, again, relying on the private sector to develop affordable housing on their own is unfeasible when there is no profit or incentive that they're interested in, right? We have incentives such as density bonuses and things like that developers are not seeking, because those tools are typically used in coastal cities that require these sort of density types to sort of be a motivating factor for them to take on that loss, you would say, of revenue from the non-market rate apartments or units that they're developing, and sort of make up that difference. But here in the Coachella Valley, at least in Cathedral City, we haven't seen developers come forward and necessarily request that. But looking at the financing, this is really the essence behind what really makes these projects come together. And as you can see, that photo on the right, that's Victor and I trying to find that piece, trying to put the puzzle together. And with that, I think this pie chart here really helps, and as well as this sort of flow chart. So in essence, what you think about, well, where does this money really come from? Then how does the gap get filled? So if you look on here, 43% are federal housing tax credits, another 11 are state housing tax credits. So that alone, 54%, right, makes up the gap on a lot of this financing. Alongside that are things that are noted, and this is from the Housing Toolkit from the Institute of Local Government, and they note local funds, other types of funds, even state mental health services. So there are different ways that these projects are utilizing services, you name it, to figure out how do we complete that gap so we can build these housing types. Because the more and more restrictive they are, like the closer you get to extremely low income, the harder it is for a developer to want to come forward and really even develop this. So this is a real generic example, and this is not specific, but I just kind of put some sort of generic numbers. But the Colvado Apartments in Coachella, they recently opened up, right? And right, kind of coming into their downtown area. So that there was an article on it that mentioned the units, the cost of the project, and so on and so forth, the size of the site. So here you can see that they've developed, and these are numbers you can see based on, I mean, previous costs, right? So let's just take that into account, that costs are changing. And so looking at this, about 108 units costed about $63 million. You break that down. I know this includes, they have some form of retail there. There may be parks and so on and so forth. But nonetheless, if you just take the number, really kind of roughly what it costs, you're looking at about $580,000 or so per unit. And so when you look at that, and we looked at the 4%, right, even that project alone, some cities are investing millions of dollars, right? And so how do us as a city, we look at what we have as a community and say, well, what are ways that we can incentivize or spur development, right? And of course, we are very cautious and understanding of our constraints with budgets and so on, but it's something to just look at, like what are the ways that projects like this are being developed. In this project, the additional housing money that was brought forward to really complete that gap is listed below. So the California Department of Housing, Community Development, Infill Infrastructure Grant, the IIG, also the Housing Authority of the County of Riverside's project-based vouchers and home program. That was another program that they tapped into. The California Department of Developmental Services, Community Resource Development Plan Priorities, the CRDP, and the City of Coachella. So one of the things that I mentioned so much, right, now that we kind of see that the tax credits, they are so crucial to developing a community. I mean, if they make up an estimated, and this is, again, these are just statistics that they're gathering, but if they're making up around 50% of the project, well, let's figure out what exactly would qualify them to fall within this. So in talking with developers that are in the affordable housing world, one of the things they will continue to look at and point you to is the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee, the CTAC, and the Housing Community Development, HCD. They are together, and they have what they call opportunity map. And in this opportunity map, it highlights highest resource, high resource, moderate resource, low resource, if there's insufficient data there, and if there's high poverty and segregation in that general area from their statistics, right? Now, the thing about this is every year it's updated. And so, in essence, some developers are kind of chasing the bullseye, right? It's kind of hard because I'd say that because I'm a very realistic person. So when you look at this map on the left-hand side, it's the 2024 opportunity map. And if you look on the right-hand side, it's the 2025 map, and you can see that some areas went up in resources and some areas went down in resources, and even the high poverty and segregation area completely shifted, right? So these are all, and again, these are complex formulas that the state uses. These are state, but what it does is this map is what developers, affordable housing developers, will utilize to define if their project is going to score enough to get either a 4% or 9% low-income housing tax credit. 4% being called the over-the-counter, although it's being more and more competitive throughout the years, and we're continuing to see more and more competition within that world because, well, again, we in the Coachella Valley are one of many cities in California that are trying to fight for affordable housing. You can see the efforts up north, and you can see it all the way to your coastal cities, that there are different efforts and different degrees and magnitudes of that. So 4% versus 9%, right? In essence, I'm a visual person, so if you look at the right-hand side, it gives you what a 9% tax credit is, and if you can see that their equity is much higher, right? So they're able to tap into a higher equity number, which allows them to focus less on having to sort of fill that gap because it helps sort of offset that. The 4% credits leave a little bit more of a gap, although they still help cover that. And so ultimately, when you look at the 9%, they provide around a 70% subsidy, which is obviously much larger, primarily used for new construction. And again, they're looking for the highest and high resource areas. Not only that, but they're also looking for property owners that are willing to some degree, give control of the property, so that because control of the asset or control of the property is required as part of these applications. So you'll need someone that's willing to be flexible on these types of projects. Not only that, but they're likely to, a number of things. They might not get what you would if it was market rate development, right? So there's a multitude of things, which is why some jurisdictions, even neighboring jurisdictions such as, Rancho Mirage, Palm Springs, Coachella, even for that, some of them are looking at ways that they utilize their own assets, and how do they use that as leveraging tools, because some cities and jurisdictions are in situations and opportunities where they can sort of allow that developer to have that control to go through the application process, sort of allowing them to go through that, because as a city, they're not necessarily looking for that. They're looking for, ultimately, how do we help our residents, and how do we help them? Well, it's getting them attainable and affordable housing, and part of that is utilizing incentives to do that. The 4%, what they call like over the counter, it's less of a subsidy. You'll see that more for like rehabs or maybe property acquisition. You'll hear sometimes that they're purchasing a property and renovating or changing it to be affordable housing. You'll see it's often for that. It has historically been seen as non-competitive, although I'm telling you that you're seeing more and more people in that field, so it is becoming more competitive. But ultimately, the way that they do that is they go back to this map and they say, well, where on this map do we, one, allow the density, two, have the resources that are needed for them to sort of qualify for the different housing tax credits, and again, try to identify sites that are feasible for the vision of the project. So it's a multitude of things that they have to balance, but part of that is, us as cities sort of helping facilitate that to some degree, and ensuring that we get them data, we get them the information. But again, looking at this chart, looking at this map, this is a way that developers are able to look at properties to really kind of from the beginning see if it will or will not fall within the high or highest resource area, which, as you can see on our map, we do not have any highest resource areas. We only have high resource areas, and those are, again, ever changing. You can see some areas are becoming moderate resource, so becoming them less and less likely. Others are changing, so just something to monitor. So, and to kind of, I guess, bring this home, we're all sitting here, and this presentation really is intended to speak to the legislative officials, and to really just showcase what types of roles that we've seen historically be played in this affordable housing world. So you see local legislative changes such as assembly bills, Senate bills, and so on and so forth that work towards trying to incentivize or allow for different types of housing types, primarily affordable housing, and ways that they do that is by increasing flexibility. So when one question that I may have if I was in your seat is like, well, what can we do? Well, as we're going through the zoning code update, that's an opportunity for everyone to really play a vital role. It's really important that we look at those opportunities, and even like with the first item that you all spoke on, things like that. There are opportunities where you all are working towards ways to facilitate housing, but in a sustainable and equitable manner. And I'm glad there was a sort of resolution on that. And to that point, we as a community, we are in economic development. We're looking at ways that where are these properties and where are they vacant, because the maps aren't telling you that, so we have to cross-reference. Luckily, we have a phenomenal GIS person in-house, so shout out to Alex. He's been working very hard with us to develop maps that help us sort of identify those places. But again, it's looking at ways that we do that, and ultimately, I guess to a local level, there are councils and other types of governing bodies that play these crucial roles, because you all shape the policies, just like, again, the first item that came up, and managing these regulations. And ultimately, some cities have gone forward and figured out ways to figure out incentives that promote development or promote affordable housing development. And one of the ways that we have seen, and we've asked a number of cities, we've met with neighboring cities just to ask them how they approach affordable housing. We have a lot of very smart people in the Coachella Valley, and it's important for us to kind of use each other as a resource. We get asked questions all the time, sometimes in the automotive world, knowing that we have that background, sometimes in even arterial roads, because we have a few of them in here. So ways that other cities have done that is they've leveraged their own land, that they have the capability of doing so, and even done that to leverage federal and state funding. So these are ways that different governing bodies and local governing bodies have been able to sort of try to address the housing needs. And as I showed you, some of the neighboring cities do have some success stories, and so we want to be part of that. And so with that, we are continuing to identify ways that we can bring forward opportunities that are available where potentially there could be affordable housing. And to that point, I'm concluding my presentation, and I am here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Becquerel. Are there any comments or questions from staff? Mr. McPhail?
Yes, thanks again for another great presentation. I worked on the housing element for City Mission Viejo, wrote some of the parts of it, but I think you really clarified some things for me in regard to the financing. That was very interesting. I'd shared with fellow commissioners and staff an LA Times article that focused on the Coachella Valley, Live to Rise, and was talking about some of the financial hurdles as well. I think the thing that really came out for me from your presentation was the table that showed how we're doing relative to our neighbors of similar size population and so on. And it is a stark contrast. And I'm just wondering, do we have a sense of why we are where we are relative to our cities? Do we have some unique factors, like is it tribal land, non-tribal land? Is there something that they're doing that we're not doing that we can do? What do you think the gist of this table is?
So, Andy and I have so many dialogues about how we love housing, by the way, of every type. I love home. I'm obsessed with homes and food, by the way, if you want to, if anybody wants to take me out to dinner. I'm just kidding. But at the end of the day, when we look at the, what is it that is moving projects in other cities to the next step, right? Because one is just an idea. Hey, I have this idea. The other is, does that idea go with the housing element? Oh, it does. Okay, now we kind of checked off the next box, and we keep checking off these boxes until we ultimately get down to the financing. And the financing sometimes is a breaking factor, because if they don't get to that point, and I had a little chart here, federal funds, state funds, they all somehow work together to achieve this. Sometimes they fall into the rental assistance world, sometimes they fall into the affordable housing development world, but like as I mentioned, the housing vouchers, and those are used as a leveraging tool by developers all the time. But, when we look at the financing overview, I left just one, sentence at the bottom, and that's relying on the private sector to just come forward and develop is unlikely because of the financing factor. It's hard. I'm just saying, it's not going to happen. A developer isn't not going to come forward with a project that is, again, not there isn't a profit to some degree on their project. So solely relying on pointing at the housing element, density types that we allow. Well, we're allowing density, and we high density in certain areas. But why isn't anyone coming forward and taking advantage of that? Well, one, we see, you can tie in a little bit of the difference of land costs here versus a coastal city, and you can see, well, a coastal city, smaller lot may cost the same as a, multi-acre lot over here. So, well, what does that do? Ultimately, it deters you from wanting or needing to take advantage of density, of higher density, because the cost of land. Also, some of that plays a role in what we've historically seen as the type of product that is developed. And most homes are single-family resident homes that there's not too many multi-family projects in general in the Coachella Valley. That is somewhat of a newer type concept, but nonetheless, as we look at how the other cities have leveraged some of their assets, some of the financing, I guess, tools that they have access to, we've seen cities kind of just play a little more active role, which is what brings forward this sort of presentation is we as well want to be active players in this affordable housing world. We do want to incentivize the development of these housing types, but in order to do so, when we look at the what sort of local legislation, what kind of role they play in, that the local legislation is who can really come forward, because leveraging those types of assets and those initiatives that are sort of set forth by either our council or the governing body of that area, those are facilitated then thus by staff such as us and our department. So ultimately, there is a process and a checks and balances of how these projects come forward, but that these types of dialogues are what are needed in order to sort of just get a better understanding as to what it takes to maybe help spur some of that development here.
If I can, I just want to offer two additional points. And if we look at Rancho Mirage and Palm Desert in particular, they have two advantages that we don't necessarily have, or at least have to the same degree. That's land and money. And I would say that they have strategically used city-owned assets and as well used housing agency funding to enter into low-interest deferred payment loans in support of affordable housing projects. And they've been very successful at it. I think that's why you see such large numbers in cities like Rancho Mirage and Palm Desert, because they've used those assets to that end. We're not as well supported with housing agency funds. I think we have a couple of million as in comparison to some of the other cities. It's a lot less, and we don't own as much land. So I think we have some challenges that we have to overcome to be successful in that space. Eric mentioned density bonus. I think one of the questions I have, and I don't have an answer for you this evening, but what might make that more appealing to the industry? The state density bonus law is just that. We have to comply at least with the state minimums, but as we look at density bonus law, there are ways that we can make that local. There are ways for us to look at that pro-housing toolbox, to look at particularly incentives that we can offer that make it more enticing for a developer to incorporate affordable housing into the project, so that maybe it's not a 100% affordable housing project, but there are units in it. We're not seeing that development today. So I think what we're required to do is to be creative and to come up with solutions that may be a little unconventional or maybe a little out of the box, because we don't have the same resources that other communities have.
So there's clearly structural things that we can't compete with neighboring cities on.
It's not to say we can't.
Right.
We don't have the depth of resources that they may have. We still can do it, but we may have more constraints.
Okay. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Mead?
That was actually really helpful, what you just said, because one of the things that jumped out to me when I looked at that chart, especially when you look at Palm Springs and Rancho Mirage, and maybe not so much Palm Desert, but Rancho Mirage and Palm Springs for sure seem to be more expensive cities to live in, right? So it was pretty surprising to me that they've actually produced so much more affordable housing than we have, because I would assume that the cost of land maybe in Cathedral City is cheaper than in Palm Springs. It seems just housing in general is more expensive there. But what I was also thinking about is, Palm Springs, Palm Desert also have very well-developed walkable shopping districts, which do lend themselves to multifamily housing being built around it. We don't have yet any sort of, we have downtown, but it is not a destination in the same way that downtown Palm Springs is, or that El Paseo is in Palm Desert. And so I'm wondering, is that something that's being discussed? I know obviously we're going to go through the development code update, but on a council level and on a city level, the idea that multifamily will be more attractive when there is more for people to do and more walkability. That was one question. And then another question was, there was a lot of discussion about city funds in some of these cities being used, city property being used. Is that something that has been brought up with council because I know I missed the middle strategic planning meeting, but I've been to 2 of the 3, I think, since I've lived here, and I don't recall any of that coming up in any of those budgeting meetings about doing a survey of what city property we have and whether or not we could put that on the table to encourage development. And then I have a comment after that, but I'll just leave you with those 2 questions for right now.
Good questions, right? So to go on your first question about walkability, so those are important, right? But one thing to note, right, when we talk about what it's going to take to finance it, is the designation of that resource area, is this map. As much as, and walkability and all of that does play a role, but some of the things that we've heard from developers on things that they're interested in knowing is there a Department of Social Services nearby? What kind of other services are around there? And those are the kinds of questions that they're really asking. Of course, we would love to have, and I think it is obviously, it's something that every resident deserves, is having a really positive way to get to and from retail shops. But I think one of the things that we want to ensure is that, that's something that through the design process, so long as the city has, the control, or there isn't like a builder's remedy or anything like that being utilized, that cities, are able to work with developers and really create a project that works. And, I encourage you all to even look at what some of the neighboring cities, what kind of projects they've put out and that are affordable. And there hasn't been one that I haven't seen that I say, wow, they look really nice. And obviously it's a very big investment. So, I think that they do take that into account. If you look at some of the newer developments, they do have like meandering sidewalks and things like that really shaded areas, things like that. And so through the design process, yes, absolutely. And you guys are all in a role to play a part in that, especially through the development code as we look at that, right? As far as the dialogue, there are several times that we've brought forward the idea of talking about affordable housing, but you all are kind of seeing this version of this presentation as we kind of start and working our way. But these are good dialogues to have, and I encourage you all to if the opportunity arises, have that to sort of further the conversation, because ultimately, us as administrators, we're able to administrate that idea and that vision. But again, that's something that that is direction would be needed to sort of say, this is X, Y, Z, right? And so not to get into anything specific on it, but good questions. And, how do we do that is, continue having these conversations, these educational opportunities to talk about some of the I guess, interesting factors that are part of affordable housing development. I guess I didn't necessarily fully answer your question on that, but we will continue to work on ways to explore things like that you just discussed. And luckily, again, we have a great GIS gentleman that helps us with all these really neat maps, and so we can look at explore. But again, those are directions that would need to be provided to us in order for us to really move forward in that direction. But me as an economic development manager, I think it's important for me to look at all angles of it and say, how do we do this in a very effective manner? And that is to have the dialogue, and if there is interest to pursue a certain, whether it be parcel or project, then that's when we as administrators can really jump in and sort of help facilitate that and navigate that, which is where we've seen some of our colleagues really play a pivotal role. Is the idea was sort of brought forward, and they helped sort of facilitate the end result.
Okay, and then I just wanted to know if, wanted to request, if you could explain for anyone who might be watching this meeting, because everyone talks about affordable housing, right? And I think people think, oh, there's no affordable housing, or oh, those are affordable. They mean affordable in a general sense. So there's big A affordable, capital A affordable, which is deed restricted, which most people don't know what that means. And those are those tiers that you were talking about. And then there's affordable, generally. Like, hey, I'm looking for an apartment, I need something affordable. They may not meet those deed restriction things. So I was wondering if you could sort of give maybe just a little bit of an overview for anybody who's watching, just so people understand what we mean when we're talking about, and when a project comes before us or comes to council, when they're talking about affordable, and how that kind of affects, the rents and all that sort of stuff, just so people have a better understanding.
Absolutely. So affordable, and I guess we'll start with like what you would typically consider to be affordable, is scrolling on Zillow and finding a property that fits sort of the estimate that you're able to cover of a mortgage. That may be your interpretation, a personal interpretation of what affordability is for our financial circumstances. Much different than what we are discussing today, which is deed restricted affordable housing that's specific to certain criteria related to AMI, so related to what individuals that fall within those categories can afford. And so when we look at specific to the household types that we're discussing, if you look at the median income here for a household of 4, that is $97,000, and then it tiers up all the way to actually acutely low. But if you look at the extremely low income, boiling down to about $31,200 for a family of 4.
And can you explain what deed restricted means?
Yes, deed restricted means that there is a deed, the deed on the project itself is each housing unit is accounted for, and the developer, as well as the person that is managing the project for its entirety, is required to maintain that affordability type and that level, so that unit cannot go up in price. It has to stay and maintain that affordability for a certain period of time, and those certain periods of time are typically in the 50-plus year range. So meaning that that unit itself will maintain that affordability for a long period of time. And so when we talk about, we as a community, there are affordable housing projects in our community already, and I don't want to miss that opportunity either. There are few and far between in comparison to maybe other areas when you look at the unit numbers, but we do have affordable housing projects here, and those are deed restricted. And we actually, as a city, we maintain that sort of running list to make sure that they stay on track of those deed restrictions. But when we talk about affordable housing, it is specific to deed restricted affordable housing that is tied to the development and is typically for a long period of time.
Thanks.
Commissioner Lee.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I agree with everyone that's been talking so far. And I understand that staff and the commission here are all concerned about the same thing, which is we're not doing well compared to other cities. And I understand some of the reasons for that. One item that you mentioned in here was I've forgotten the term already, builder's something or other.
Builder's remedy.
Builder's remedy. And you said, when we fail to meet the RHNA numbers, that's one of the possible outcomes. And I'm wondering, how close are we in the current cycle to that?
To be clear, the builder's remedy applies when you do not have a certified housing element. We have a certified housing element. I think what Eric is impressing on all of us is we need to maintain that housing element. So failing to meet RHNA doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to lose our housing element certification.
Okay.
I think what HCD is looking for is meaningful progress towards the implementation of your housing element, the goals, the programs that are contained in the housing element, and ensuring that we're permitting that housing. These are goals. It in a lot of ways is a paper document, but we need to make that meaningful effort to implement the housing element. Something that we've heard about through recent legislation as we get into the 7th cycle, there may be penalties for cities that fail to meet the RHNA allocation. A little bit different than builder's remedy. So builder's remedy applies when you don't have a certified housing element, but HCD may still impose stricter standards if you have not built the number of units that you were required in the previous cycle. For instance, you may have a shorter period of time to prepare your 7th cycle housing element and to get that housing element certified, or else you may be exposed to builder's remedy. So that is something that we're hearing more about. We're certainly going to be paying attention to that. We've got a few years before we're going to be underway with the 7th cycle. That's really going to get started in 2027, but I think it's something to be aware of now. Let's not lose our certification, and let's understand the repercussions of not meeting our RENA numbers as we get closer to the 7th cycle.
Yeah, I think the concern in terms of losing certification is that, we can't build 500 houses tomorrow. And so if I look at the one case that came before us in the last 3 years was Desert Bloom, which actually did take advantage of density allowance in order to give us 2 or 3 deed-restricted properties, and that's been in the works now actually for longer than 3 years, because that property has come and gone with different plans and so on. So, it takes a long time for us to get this housing in place, particularly with the deed-restrictions. So I am concerned, and I'm sure you are too, that we don't seem to be moving ahead fast enough in order to avoid that, where we do lose that accreditation. So
It is a concern. I would say the slide that you saw that shows entitlements, that is a slide that gives me more hope and optimism. RENA right now, we're only counting what has been permitted, not necessarily what is entitled. So we do have entitlements that are in the pipeline. As those get permitted, that will count towards our 6th cycle RENA. Now, those are market rate. That's not necessarily affordable. But as we're continuing to talk to developers, we are encouraging affordable housing to be included as part of the project. So as we talk North City, and we do have a prospective developer in the North City, and this is something we have discussed with City Council as we led a study session discussion about the development of North City. We said we ought to include affordable housing as a part of this. We're aiming for 10% affordable housing in North City. That will go a long way to helping us meet our affordable housing goals. That is one of the goals that's in our housing element. That's one of the programs for us to negotiate the inclusion of affordable housing in projects. So a project of that scale and magnitude of North City, that does give us a significant opportunity to not only entitle, but to permit affordable housing as part of that project.
I noted in the presentation, it kind of resonated with me, because one slide said that City Council policy is critical to ensuring that we do this job, that we get that affordable housing. And I'm wondering what other changes might be necessary, maybe establishing more carrots or better sticks from a City Council perspective, because I suspect a lot of this impetus has to come from them. That we can sit here and be unhappy about it, but we can't change anything.
I think we've talked density significantly tonight. Density is a key part of this discussion, and I think as we continue with the Development Code update, that is a subject for us to continue to explore, to continue to look at the density allowances in our residential zone districts, whether those are adequate, whether those should be modified to encourage more development, more units within the community. I think that's a key part of it, and the Development Code update is a significant way for us to assess our zoning regulations in a way that we're ensuring that we're permitting, allowing not only residential development, but residential development at an appropriate density.
And I think to kind of add onto what Andy's saying is, I believe that I've seen that, our council is supportive of affordable housing. I think what other cities have sort of used is sort of continue to expand on that and said, okay, well, what is possible? And obviously, like we talked about, some neighboring cities, they have bigger resources where they can tap into to help facilitate that. But also, it's what they did that's different than typical development is they were being proactive by doing the RFPs, the request for proposals, because of the fact that they had availability of assets to be able to negotiate. So that's one way that they incentivize affordable housing, because they were controlling the narrative, they were controlling the asset. So that's just one mechanism. That's not to say that that is the one and only way to do this. Again, it's, it's identifying, looking at that map, or there are ways that we can look at certain properties that are maybe privately owned, that are better suited for housing, that would maybe score better on that map in order for them to get better financing options. So we'll continue to have dialogues, but I think council has been supportive of it. It's just us as staff, me being in this role. I know you said a year. I wish it was a year. Not yet, but almost, right? And so I think one of my roles is to say, okay, well, one is generic risk management, right? We talked about the auto industry. We talked about preventative measures. To me, I'm very I'll go to the dentist all day, right? Because I'm preventative. I want to prevent the pain that I will remember forever as a kid. But I think that's one way that us as staff are looking at housing and saying, okay, well, maybe let's approach it and see what other cities have done that was a proactive way instead of a reactive way, which is kind of like some of the other mechanisms that you'll see is in general development. It's kind of funny, but in general, most departments are reactive to projects, meaning that it's what comes to the desk and then it's processed. Our department, very different. We're definitely out there, and we're one of the only that are proactive, that are actually trying to figure out ways to look at the risk and ensure that we as a city maintain that, because it's very important that the cities maintain control, because as we just talked about, that can be an economic development tool for us. And so we want to ensure that we're able to have that dialogue and have that sort of input on projects, because of the importance that economics has on specific projects. So we'll continue to have that, and I think that all of you have, we've had good conversations, and I think through the zoning code, we're going to continue having more discussions on housing. So, sorry to rant on there a little bit, but yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bedard?
Yeah, so I love, Andy, when you say things like unconventional. There's even the focus of this evening is about empty lots and lots that haven't been built on and lots that could be combined and lots that could be something in the future, tomorrow, 20 years from now. What we have is a plethora of single-family homes. And I could pass along a very interesting mini documentary about the city of San Jose that was turned into basically a single-family home, and how the city is suffering extremely because of decades of forcing that and being very strict about zoning. So what we do have a plethora of are these single-family homes, and one of the ways that we could encourage that is by developing our R1 zonings and encouraging small lot subdivision, encouraging people to put ADUs, encouraging by removing height restrictions and stuff like that. And so instead of what was presented previously about, well, if people want to add on, they have to go into the backyard or side yard, they can actually go up. Whereas the standard, I believe, for the city is that if the builder build it that way and it's single-family homes and it's staying single-family homes and there's that height that's being respected. So to lean into what we already have, our strong point is single-family homes. I wonder, instead of incentivizing builders, if we could incentivize our residents. Rio del Sol, which all those new development, all the new building that they're doing there, some of their most popular floor plans, I think the most popular floor plans, all have an ADU. Every single one of them has an ADU already built into the structure. Super in demand. Everybody wants one, apparently. I wonder if there's a way to incentivize our own population to actually build up, instead of, from a mental health perspective, building out, increasing the footprint, makes the yard smaller, makes gathering spaces smaller, makes family space smaller. But the variance of height creates issues, and not allowing height. If there's a way we could go to our residents and say, we want you to add on a granny unit. We want your grandparents to move here. We want your children to, instead of everybody living in the same house and sharing a 3-bedroom, we want you to build on, and we're going to incentivize our own residents to do those conversions. Like right now, I know you can have you could do a duplex if you have a garage or something, but that space can't be opened up into the existing home. So that conversion and that restriction makes it so that it's not adding another unit, but it is increasing the living space for the single family, which is now multifamily. I don't know how to do it necessarily, but it would be super cool if we went to our own people, said, hey, we have an issue, we want to solve that issue, and let's see how we can bring more housing to all of our neighbors, especially as a standard with California, allowing small lot subdivisions up to, I think, 1,200 square feet now. If you have a 2,400 square foot lot, you could literally put two 1,200 square feet buildings. I wonder how we could do that.
And you know, so we do have, I think the city's taken some steps to try to work on ways to.
Well, we do have the ADU plans, which are awesome, but it's not incentivizing.
A lot of good points, right? This is dialogue that I think we can continue to have. I think I think ADUs on its own are kind of its own thing that I think is worth discussing on, but. There are cities have gotten creative on ways that they incentivize ADU production, and that's one thing that's on our radar is how do we get our residents to want to develop more, and that's something that I can work with Andy on and really kind of maybe drill down a little bit more on ways that we incentivize the use of both the pre-designed ADU plans, but also maybe discuss with the residents. And part of our zoning code update. We are doing some of that, right? We're asking what are some of the restrictions that you're seeing, what are some of those things, and so that's another thing that maybe we can talk to our consultants and see how we can. And I know that they've touched on that, but just kind of reiterate, like, hey, this is something that was brought up.
I like unconventional, and when I hear phrases like, well, that's how the builder built it, and that was like in my neighborhood 70 years ago, 60-something years ago, that doesn't sit well with me, because that was 70 years ago in a completely different economic environment, even a completely different community. So to maybe push the envelope there would be fascinating to figure out.
Thank you, Commissioner Bedard. If there's no more questions from staff, I will open for public comments. Are there anybody that would like to speak from the public?
We have no members in the audience, Commissioner.
And I will close the public comment period and close the discussion. And is there any direction for staff or any other concluding comments?
I would maybe just say, if the City Council haven't yet seen that really gangbusters table of how we're doing relative to other cities, I think it would be really good to get that before them and maybe explain why we are where we are and maybe how we can move that a little bit. I think that'd be a really good starting point to talk to the City Council. Hopefully they'd be interested.
That was part of the annual progress report presentation to City Council in March.
All right, thanks.
Okay, so that brings us to commissioners' reports. Commissioner McPhail, do you have anything?
Yeah. I'd like to ask again, maybe, in terms of our agenda format. I think, we're moving ahead on the zoning code, development code update, and I think we're at a point, perhaps, where I would really appreciate seeing an item on our agenda called zoning code, development code update reports. And if there's nothing to report, we move on. But, I think we had a situation last week where we were almost finished something, and Ms. Schultz remembered, oh, I've got something to tell you about the the zoning code. So it would be much better, I think, if we actually had this in here so that Ms. Schultz and the rest of us are ready to talk about that, particularly the people who are on the task force here. I think there's been one meeting on the task force that I don't know what happened in that task force. It would be interesting to find out.
The first meeting.
It was the
we
first
haven't
one.
met since then.
Right, but yeah, did anything happen? I don't know. So it'd be useful to hear back on those meetings, and then those of us who are not in the task force can say, "Oh, that's interesting. Could you tell them this next time you meet?" So I think
Does
I think
adding
we're at
that
the point where
item,
we need that.
does adding that item need to be a amended thing? Sorry.
I'm done.
Commissioner Mead?
I do not have anything, thanks.
Whoever I am, me. I brought show and tell. Just so excited that I'm currently working my way through a rather long report called Incentive Zoning. And I also finished Housing Supply Accelerator. So really, I'm plugging the fact that if you aren't already, as a commissioner, a member of the APA, you might want to join, because they've got all kinds of resources on their website like this. And any topic that you want to investigate, you can do that through that. They also have some great local groups and training. So there was that. I just wanted to mention that Director Feinstein and I had a short discussion about special plans in general, and it seems that we have a lot of special plans, and I'm not putting words in his mouth, but it sounded to me like a lot of these are now irrelevant. They were only done 40 years ago. And so that whole special plan area needs to be completely re-evaluated. And I'm sure a lot of that rolls into the zoning code update. But, this is not a single isolated incident with this special plan. There's a whole bunch of them. So I'm glad to hear that we are going to address that as a project or a sub-project of the development. And the third thing I had was just a suggestion which the Commission can consider, provided you decided it was okay for me to say this. Okay. So it occurred to me that the City Council meetings always start at 5:30, not 6 o'clock. And one of the good things about that is that staff then, they don't have to hang about for an extra half hour before our meetings start, and they get, hopefully, to go home at a decent hour. So I would like to suggest we consider that another meeting to change the timing for the start of our meetings. All right.
And I think that on your APA thing, I'm a member, there's a discounted rate for planning commissioners.
Yes.
Then, if you're an actual professional planner, then they charge you through the nose. But there is a discounted rate for planning commissioners, and also for you to go to the conferences.
Right.
Just so everybody knows. Commissioner Bedard.
Yeah, I just didn't know. I know that request as far as itemizing as something on the agenda, if that needs to be formalized as a formal request to actually have it show up, or if there needs to be a motion or something of that sort. No? No?
Staff.
I think we can accommodate it. I think it's a reasonable request, and we can modify the agenda to include a zoning code update on future agendas.
Cool. And I had asked Cynthia to send out a group email about an interesting article or news story that was done on CalEarth, that type of, yeah, I didn't know if you saw it. No, I didn't hear anybody's thoughts on that. But just thank you. And I didn't formally recognize the city last time. We did our Mental Health Awareness Month event at the end of May. And it was extremely well attended, and I just wanted to say thank you specifically to Eric and to Ryan and those who really stepped forward to promote it. It was a great event, and apparently the mayor said it's going to be annual, so yeah, thank you much.
Okay, we'll move on to city attorney comments.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to report from me, other than I will be presenting at the upcoming APA conference in Monterey in, I think, September. So hope to see some of you there.
And staff comments.
Sure. So I just want to make sure that we've heard the commission. We will include the zoning code update on future agendas as well. We will agendize for a future meeting discussion on the meeting time. I didn't see anything off the cuff, but we'll schedule that so the commission can have further discussion on that. So in my brief comments, I want to express my gratitude to the Commission for the robust discussion tonight and these continued discussions. So we opened an opportunity for the Commission to agendize for discussion policy items, and we've done that by creating this look-ahead work plan and really empowering you to control your work plan, and it's working exceedingly well. So I want to say thank you for that. And we'll continue to do that. We are in the process of preparing a white paper in response to Commissioner Bedard's comments, and we'll distribute that as soon as that white paper is done. I have a draft of it on my desk. We'll be responsive there. And as we look at the look-ahead agenda for the future, we don't have anything scheduled yet for July, but we do have the cottage food industry and micro-enterprise home kitchens scheduled tentatively in August. And we will also work in a strategic evaluation and review of the city's strategic plans. That is timely with the development code update so that we can determine whether there are some that can just be repealed without question, that are obsolete and that have no relevance anymore. Others that may need some modification either to the specific plan or that we may need to consider for the development code update, and others such as Verano that may have been done recently and that will survive the development code update. So we'll start scheduling that for discussion, trying to work that in so that we're not overloading the commission, trying to be responsive to new land use applications, trying to prioritize those, but working in continued special discussions from those requests that have come up from the commission as well as these additional items.
Do we have a meeting scheduled for June 18?
We do not have a meeting scheduled for June 18th at this point. Looks like the next meeting, based on the calendar, is August 6th.
Okay, with that, I will adjourn the meeting at 9:02 Pacific time.